Well, for a change, the sun is shining in Belgium, and we go a long way back to remember such an occasion. It is the 86th running of the Tour of Flanders. Hello again, everybody. I'm Phil Liggett, and welcome along to this video from World Cycling Productions on this great race. Indeed, the greatest race, which is in Belgium, and it began back in 1913. And you know, the Belgians don't like to lose on their own roads. 61 times they've been victorious here, and very few other countries have managed to break in. But this so far has been the Italians' year, and there are plenty of good Italians here now to take on the few stars from Belgium. But more importantly, I think for us all, US Postal are here, and here in strength. Lance Armstrong saying he's here to ride for George Hincapie, who has great form. But you know, I reckon if Lance gets the chance, he'll try to win for himself as well. There are plenty of other good bike riders, and back is our old favourite. Back for the first time in 15 years, the Koppenberg. Yes, it's been resurfaced, but resurfaced with cobblestones. And this is a great course for those who want to win big bike races. 264 kilometres, there are 16 climbs, and the last climb coming just before the finish. Well, before we go to the action, we can now join Paul Sherwen. He's in amongst it in the square, talking to the riders as usual.
Well, Georgie, this is the day you've been waiting for, and quite an amazing year this year because Lance has decided to come down here and help you at the Tour of Flanders.
Yeah, Lance has made a big commitment in changing the schedule around a bit for me, and I'm really excited. I've worked really hard for this week coming up, so I'm excited, confident, and ready.
And as in previous years, you used the 3 days of La Panne to prepare for this. This time, no surprises, no crashes. It seems as if everything's right.
Yeah, unfortunately, I missed a couple of races in March. I got sick for a day or two, but I think it ended up working out better. I felt really fresh in Depana, and every day I felt stronger, and I feel great right now.
The difference with Lance coming back to Tour of Flanders after a long time is he won't have the knowledge you've got of this race, and it's very important in the Tour of Flanders to know exactly where the climbs are going to be.
Yeah, definitely. We have radios, and we're going to try to stay together as much as possible. And Lance commands, the most respect from the peloton, so that's a big factor in this race.
But this is going to be George Hincapie's week. Flanders, Gent-Wevelgem, Paris-Roubaix. This is what you live for.
Yeah, I've worked really hard for this week, and I think I'm ready. Thanks, Paul.
Lance's first time back to the Tour of Flanders for a long time, and looks like the weather's turned out good for you.
Like Freddie always says, if the sun comes out, then we're really lucky. That's the mentality here, because it's very rare that the sun shines, but it's a beautiful day.
It's a beautiful day. George Hincapie seems to be in excellent form, and you've actually changed your program this year to come out and help George, who seems to have been a bit isolated at the end of some of the one-day classics.
Well, I hope I can help. I can't make any promises because it's, Tour of Flanders is arguably the hardest race of the year for one day, and so I don't know that I'm good enough right now. But George has always been close, and I think he stands a big chance. And in my mind, actually, he's the #1 favorite for today.
What would the scenario be if you and George were together at the end in a small group of 10 riders at the Mur de Grammont? Would you wait back for him, or would you maybe try and solo for yourself?
No. I have no personal ambitions today. I'll stay with George all day.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Lance, please. Frank is just over there. Lance, please.
Lance.
Fred, great start to the season with second place in Milan-San Remo, and here the possibility of taking the lead in the World Cup competition.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I think there's a good chance. I think Flying Car is one of probably my biggest rivals for that. Johan's riding really strong, so I think as a whole team we have a strong team, and to make it a lot easier for me to be up there. Thank you.
Well, Stefan, here at the Tour of Flanders, these are the kind of races that over the past couple of years we've seen you very close to the win. How's the form today?
I think it's nearly the same like the last 2 years, and we see in the race, it's a lot of tactics, and you need a lot of luck to be in the front. So the last week it's very comfortable for me in Belgium, and today it's special, but I hope I'm in the final.
Have you been to see the new Koppenberg to see what it's like?
Yeah, we've been there 2 days ago for visitors, the climb, and I think it's not so especially it's hard, and but everybody is concentrated on this, and I think the attack for a finish is on the different place, and it's east wind, so I think after the Koppenberg a lot of riders coming back, and from the Mur and from Bosberg it's wind in the head. I don't know, 2 years ago was the same wind, and I was 40 on the finish. I don't know what's happened today. Thank you.
Mario,
this year
has been a start to the season for you like a real dream. It's the dream of a complete career. To win Milan-San Remo, it's something very special for me. It's something to do with life, and I'm so proud, and I just feel that I can't do better. And now to come to the start of the Tour of Flanders with the leader of the World Cup jersey, it's very special for me. Cycling is in the heart of people here in Belgium. We see so many people here coming to this race. And 9:30 in the morning at the start of a race, it's amazing to see so many people. Everybody really wants to come and race in Belgium. And I hope that I'm as competitive today, and I hope I can ride a good result today for myself and for the team. The time, the weather here, it's absolutely fantastic. It's good for us, for the Italians, because we don't like too much to race in the rain and the cold weather. We'll see what happens, and I'll do what I can.
So the riders called up to the start line. Paul Sherwen still in amongst it down there at the moment. Final preparations now. They face up to this long journey out to the coast first of all. I think it's the children there counting down in Flemish to the off. So the race that stops all of Belgium for a day, 264 kilometers, that's 164 miles. The riders have in fact a 15-minute neutralized rollout before the flag goes down on the Ostende road, and then they head out towards the coast, making the way what is going to be, I think, a very difficult day of cycling. There's Cipollini in no hurry to find his way through the field. It is a big field, 25 teams as well. As I can say now, Paul Sherwen has hot-footed it up to the commentary box as we now look at shaping of the race. Now what has happened here, soon after the start this morning, 4 riders got away. They came together as a group of 4 at 34 kilometers, Paul. Alexi Rodriguez of the Kelme team, Ronnie Schultz of Gerolsteiner, Jan Kijks. There's the gap for you. It is still growing, by the way, up to 19 minutes on the peloton. It was 16 not long ago. Jan Kijks is in Vlaanderen 2002. Erwin Thijs, probably the best known of this group, although he's 31 now, rides for Palmans at the moment. There are 2 riders in between. We're yet to nail them down completely. One is certainly Rafael Diaz Justo of the Once, and the other one is a rider from the Banesto team, but we'll catch up with that very shortly. So it is a breakaway that I suppose, Paul, we expected, but they've given it a long lead here.
It's a huge advantage at this stage, but if you look at the style of these riders, you can tell they're starting to weaken. And the way the wind is blowing today, the wind will be on the riders' faces once we get into the hilly section of the course, and it will be very difficult for these guys to survive, because when we do come to the strategic climbs, the main field will absolutely accelerate, especially when we get closer to the climbs like the Old Quaremont. These guys have built up a big advantage, yes, but I think they're going to get pulled in before we get down to the finish line in Merbeck, and we will have a normal race at the Tour of Flanders.
As we now search out the main peloton here at Vanachem, 134 kilometers still to go, and the first climb of the Molenberg comes with 113 kilometers left to ride. Then there's 16 climbs, and it becomes a real race. And what a fabulous race this has developed. Like all of cycle racing around the world in these major events, it seemed to have grown and grown. The crowd's bigger than ever, as the Tour of Flanders now in its 86th edition. It attracts all of Belgium, stops the show for the whole day. Yesterday there were some 15,000 cyclists rode the course, exactly the same course that the riders are riding today. Tourist cyclists who enjoyed tackling the climbs, many of them American too. We met them this morning, very proud of themselves, as well they might be, having gone round the same course as the riders, but they shouldn't compare their times, that's for sure. Into Vanachem now, a little stretch of cobblestones to the main peloton. Nobody there, Paul, really pushing this. They're just doing tempo at the front. We've heard nothing from Radio Tour to give us any indication that riders of importance have gone out, because so often the bad news is the crashes out on the coast in the crosswinds, but we haven't heard a thing today, which is good. I may have spoken too soon, though, because there's a faller there on the left straight away, and that doesn't look very comfortable at all. It's a Gerolsteiner rider who's gone down.
Tell you one thing, when you go down on those cobblestones, they really are very hard, and this man looks as if he's got a real serious problem with his wrist there. The spectators are in at the side of the road. In fact, I think that's Olaf Polak who's gone down there. He was a very good individual time trial. There's a bit of panic there too, but the speed of the race, if he isn't too badly injured, and he still is holding his arm in a rather strange position there, if he can get himself back up to the main field, he could recover. But this is how it happened, and it's very often, Phil, the most dangerous, in fact, when the race is not going full on, because riders tend to be just a little bit too relaxed, and that's exactly what's happened down there, and he certainly does look as if he's injured that wrist quite badly.
Martin Elmiga from the Phonak team, the Swiss champion there, was the rider delayed. He's gone off. Yes, it looks as though he either twisted his wrist. I hope he's done no more than just that. It's painful on those cobblestones, Paul.
It certainly is. They are very hard indeed. These riders now going through this cobblestone section at Waregem. The main field are around about 30 kilometers before they get to the first climb of the Molenberg. And as they do get closer to those climbs, they will start to accelerate, and we'll see this whole main field stretch out into one long line. Looks like Freddie Rodriguez there riding in about 3rd or 4th position. The American champion is 2nd overall in the World Cup competition, and I think this year looking to put himself up with a fine performance. US Postal are riding very close to the front, and it is interesting to talk to Lance Armstrong. He said here that he's absolutely dedicated to try and get George Hincapie a win for the first time in a World Cup race. He had a great win last year in Gont-Wevelgem, but this year he's hoping that he can win either the Tour of Flanders or Paris-Roubaix, and he's based the whole of his early season on making sure he's on form. And this year he's had no bad luck at all, as in previous years. A couple of years ago he crashed in the 3 days of La Panne and cracked a rib, but right now I think George is probably on the best condition he's ever had in his career.
The average speed just under 40 kilometers an hour. The two riders who were chasing now are absorbed by the peloton, Diaz Justo and Odriozola. So there's only the 4 leaders, but it's an awful lot of work to bring back 19 3/4 minutes. I'm sure of that. Little view at the back here, not surprisingly, a little Colombian rider on the right there for Kelme is not enjoying the cobblestones.
It's always very important to ride in the first 15-20 places, and you can see right now a little more urgency at the front end of the main field as there's another crash at the back. That's why you have to ride at the front.
And one or two taking the chance to get off here while they queue round what looks like a big shunt here of riders. Nobody's getting through. Let's hope they're all okay. We'll get through with the cameras as well, I suspect. And Palman's here now trying to cool the peloton off, because they've got a man in that breakaway in Erwin Thijs. And so they've got control of the peloton again, slowing it down, backing it off. As a result, the field has got back on at the back. Looks as though we've got certainly one US Postal up there, and they're all up. The men that matter are here. George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong right at the front, checking on the situation behind, both looking very good at the moment.
Well, they obviously realise and know just exactly what to do. There on the left-hand side, you can just see Eric Zabel as well. He's very much in control of Team Telecom here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Zabel putting in a good performance here. They've got a very good two-pronged attack as well, with Stefan Weseman, the kind of rider who really adores coming up here to Belgium to ride these races in the northern climes at the early part of the season. A tough bike rider who excelled in the Peace Race, the race that used to be the biggest amateur race in the world, but now very much an integral part of Team Telecom's one-day classics riders.
Yeah, it's a good team for this race, Telecom today, and a puncture here at the back of the field. This is Tom Steels, and that is a shame, because Tom is having... Now that's the problem when you've had a crash, the cars aren't there.
That's the big problem when the field gets split up like that. You can stand at the side of the road for a minute or a minute and a half waiting for your team car to come forward. It's interesting to know that none of the other riders on the Mapei squad were to give their wheel to Tom Steele, so obviously he's not one of the team leaders today. I think the responsibility for this race today is probably going to lie on the shoulders of Robbie Hunter, the South African, who is in excellent form, and of course Stefano Zanini as well.
Yeah, they're definitely the two men for Mapei today. Over the Schelde, which is the big river that courses through Belgium and on into Germany. And still a very big commercial river here, because barge traffic is very popular for transport in Europe. And the peloton really have reformed here, except poor old Tom Steels. And I really would like to see him come back after his illness, mononucleosis, and have a very good race. But there we are, left by the roadside, and I don't think he can possibly rejoin now. These boys are getting themselves into a nice fast tempo. Back up to the 4 leaders now. Here they are. There they are listed for you. Rodriguez, Schultz, Keitz and Thijs at 122 kilometers from the finish for them. This is now meaning that we are not very far away. from the climb of the Molenberg. It comes at 113 to go.
Well, these guys will get their first taste of the uphill. This is another long section of cobblestones at Lippenhovenstraat, 1.3 kilometers. You can see by the style of these guys, this is Erwin Thijs at the back. You see, it is very difficult right now for these guys. They are starting to feel the pain of the breakaway situation they've been in. They've put a lot of energy into building up that 19.5 minutes advantage. But I think when the main field starts to approach climbs like the Old Quaremont at 45 to 50 kilometers an hour, you'll see that little figure at the top of the screen there start to plummet quite rapidly.
Well, Erwin Thijs, 3 small wins, all in Belgium in the Kermesse races last year. They're the races that are around about 120, 150 kilometres around the towns here, and he managed to pick out 3 of those to win. But he's not a big winner anymore, and as I say, he's 31 years of age now. But he's obviously decided to go out early today to grab a little bit of television time. Although he's not contributing much to this breakaway anymore, and they've been out front now for just on 90 kilometres.
The man doing most of the work on the front there is the Kelme rider Alexis Rodriguez Hernandez. Kelme really are quite a remarkable team. We expect to see them riding well in races like the Giro d'Italia, Tour de France and Vuelta a España, but their riders will always have a go in a race. They will always try and get themselves into a breakaway situation. In years gone by, it was very rare to see the Spanish coming up to take part in these races, but over the last few years the sport has become so much more international that the Spanish teams come up here to the races in Belgium and the north of France, and they are competitive.
Yes, and it's good to see as well, because the Italians didn't like to travel either, but they are now having a very, very good start to the season indeed. As the Flandrian flags wave on, and they've got plenty to wave at in this breakaway, with Erwin Thijs and teammate, well, ex-teammate in fact, Jan Keitz from Vlaanderen 2002. The gap, despite all, has only been dropped by about 20 seconds at the moment. So they're surviving well, but when the legs go, it'll probably go rather badly. Now, what's this? This is another crash here, is it? Oh, it's a puncture to Cipollini. This is a replay they've just brought in. So this has happened moments ago. And a flat wheel for Mario Cipollini. He's not having much of a day, Paul.
Definitely not having very much luck at all, but his teammates were all around him there. He's obviously in fine form at the start of this season. Cipollini having a much better start to the year, I think, than he's had in recent years, and that's why he managed to come up with that very good win in Milan-San Remo. This here, the Padestar, another crash here, and I think this was at the back end of the main field, and that's the chaos in the cars. The cars do an absolutely incredible job of avoiding riders. Let's just see if we can see how that happened there. The Kelme rider, he probably caught that little line down the middle of the road. Now, the riders call that Death Valley because these roads are made of concrete and they're stuck together in the middle. Another puncture here for Tom Steels. This really is quite remarkable. This is turning out to be quite a dramatic day for Tom. He's got a teammate there, in fact, who stopped at the side of the road with him as well.
Well, I'm just wondering if Tom swap wheels with him or whether he got away first, but he's gone. Now Steels is back in the action, and we think it was a wheel swap with Robbie Hunter there.
It looked very much like it might have been, Robbie. This is total chaos here right now. There are bike riders all over the place. Well, there, in fact, is Tom Steels getting himself back into the race, and that big, strong figure, the other Mapei rider, it could well have been Robbie Hunter trying to get himself back in. But there's no panic right now because you can see the main field is all over the road. They are not going very fast at all, probably 42, 43 kilometers an hour, but that will speed up quite dramatically once we go through the feeding station. Feeding station coming just before Klausbergen.
Now here's that wheel change again, which was fair enough by Tom as he puts the wheel in. There's, as you see, no team car. It arrives afterwards, and so although he's given the wheel to Robbie, Robbie's struggling to get it into his bike.
But you have to take that kind of a risk when you're in a situation like this because you don't know how far behind the team cars are going to be, especially having gone through one or two cobble sections like that. St. Martin-Laartem right now, not too far away from Brakel. Brakel being the town which nearly every Belgian race in Flanders seems to go through, and it's the town where, in fact, Peter van Petegem comes from. So he'd be pretty much on home training ground right now. He'll know exactly where he is, and if I was a spectator there, I'd be a little bit careful of stepping back because these guys, they use the cycle paths very often to try and move up the main field because, as you can see, the field is all over the road there, and the cycle paths here in Belgium are a very good opportunity to move forward, but they can be very dangerous. I remember a situation in the Tour de France a few years ago when I was racing, when Marcel Tinassi was moving up the outside of the spectators, moving in fact forward Sean Kelly. A spectator moved backwards, he hit him and he broke the scaphoid bone in his wrist there, but he actually managed to carry on and finish the Tour de France, but he was in severe pain for many days.
A huge risk. When you're on normal cycling here in Belgium, by the way, you have to ride on the cycle path. You're not allowed to ride on the highway, which makes sense, I guess. But you've got to find out sometimes where they've actually disappeared to, because they're not always plainly marked, and sometimes they've popped up on the opposite side of the road, so you have to change sides of the road to ride the cycle path. 1911, well, it's slowly eroding, but slowly is the word just now at 120 kilometers to go. 7 kilometers now from the Molenberg. Lotto driving well at the front with no obvious winner on their team, because Andre Schmil also out, which is rather sad for him today, having hoped to retire by Paris-Roubaix with a classic victory in his favoured Belgian nationality now. And in fact he's learning to speak Flemish, although he lives in Italy currently. Now he's a naturalised Belgian. He has promised he will return to make his final home in Belgium. And I think as a result of the accidents which have kept him out, but back to the leaders as we approach the Molenberg, I think Andre Schmil will ride his season out now, and who knows, he might be the world champion by the end of the year. There's the Molenberg, the first of the 16 climbs now. 9.8% is the gradient, that's 1 in 10. And it is going to be, is it going to be goodbye here to Alexis Rodriguez? He's struggling a little bit as he hits the cobblestones.
Amazing to see the cobblestones like this, because the month of April normally in Belgium is all about what this race is. It's normally very wet, normally very windy. Today the conditions are absolutely perfect, and see how quickly that time gap has come down.
Yep.
We've actually gone inside the 17 minutes right now. Rodriguez not very much at home, but he'll be able to recover over the top of this climb. And the crowds here, I think, are probably the biggest I've seen at the Ronde van Vlaanderen. And almost certainly many of these people will rush away from here and try and see the race in a different spot. Many of these people actually bringing portable TVs to the race to continue watching the race live over the 4 hours of coverage which is put on for what is the biggest bike race and one of the biggest sporting events that Belgium has to offer.
So over the top of the Molenberg, first introduced into Flanders in 1983, and this will be the 18th time they've gone over the top there. And no damage done to the brake, but the gap has come down significantly now, and he's tumbling rather quickly. But they'll try and reorganize themselves now as they square up for the Wolverberg in the next climb to come. And then after that, they're going to be meeting them approximately every 8 or 9 kilometers. Now Liepenhovenstraat for the peloton, and they are driving now at the front, and Lotto are doing a lot of the damage here. Oh, that man just got through under the sides there with 1 foot out of the pedal. And good job he missed that ditch there, Paul. It would have been a long way out.
Well, this is the chaos at the back end of the main field. This is why a lot of riders are moving forward right now. There's Paolo Bettini as well, the Mappe rider. He's riding a great race here. It's amazing character, Bettini, because not only do we see him capable to be competitive in the hilly races like Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but he's also, for a small rider, pretty good on the cobblestones, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him going out on an attack once we get to the latter part of this race over some of the climbs like Ten Bosch or the Mur de Grammont. No longer in the shadow of Michele Bartoli, who's moved away from Mappe. I think Bartoli a lot happier now because he feels that with the Faso Bortolo team he is a lone leader, and he has the complete support of the team when he comes to the races that he wants to win.
Looking at the Lotto boys here, I better correct what I said about Schmil, of course. I completely forgot about Peter van Petegem, who is my favourite to win the race. But it's funny how the mind goes blank sometimes. I was thinking of the old American Mercury team, which Van Petegem was obliged to leave mid-term and come back to Lotto. He is really riding well and clearly feeling good, because he sent the team to the front here to ride and try and reduce the size of this peloton.
A long section of cobblestones here. These guys really are starting to pick up the pacemaking right now, and I can't wait for us to get through to the big climbs of the Knokteberg, Olde Quaremont and the Patersberg, because this field, which is still almost complete with the same number of riders who they had on the start, I think will literally explode when we get the speed and the repetition of all the big cobble climbs that we're coming to quite shortly.
16 minutes 18 seconds now. Soon to be inside for sure. Heading towards the Wolvenberg, one of the newest climbs in the Tour of Flanders. Hasn't been used before 1999. And this will only be the third time, or the fourth time rather, over the top this time.
It's a long section of cobbles, this, Phil. The Paddestraat is a very famous section of cobblestones, and that's why you see these guys from Lotto have come forward to really put the hammer down. Van Petegem just a little bit further back. There is Ludo Dirksen's as well in third position there in the Lamprey jersey, the pink and blue jersey. He's a man who would really like to try and get himself a victory here, and I wonder if we will see a repetition of last year when Lamprey had their two strong riders in that leading group at the end, Ludo Dirksen's and Maximilian Chiandri, the British-Italian rider on the squad. Chiandri's looked quite relaxed over the last couple of days, and I think he's looking forward to the last couple of years as a professional cyclist, and who knows, he may well come up with a big victory that I've always felt that he was going to get one day or another.
Some fine riding here. Not too sure who this rider is. It could be Thierry Marichal driving at the front for Lotto. But whatever it is, he's doing a jolly good pacemaking job, and he's got that line strung right out now, and we've got a problem here. These are the riders now at the back of the race, and you can see how they are being dispatched from the rear of the group, one after another. This is Jörg Ludwig, the German rider on Seiko, who usually has good early season form. He rode pretty well again in the Tour Down Under. And they're saying it's Nico Ikut. Oh no, has given up, is what that means, opgegeven. So Ikut has dropped back and dropped out. We saw him earlier.
Well, I was surprised to see him actually get back into the race, Phil, but because it was the Tour of Flanders, he obviously pushed himself through an awful lot of pain to get back into the main field. But I think that bang was just a little bit too much to carry on, especially in a race as difficult as this. You see how that acceleration has caused a lot of riders to start to string off the back here. The pressure is now starting to come on in the Tour of Flanders for the first time since they left Bruges this morning, and the speed will pick up as we get, and this I think is at the back of the race. This is the problem with Nico Eekhout. It was because of that crash a little bit earlier on. He was going back towards the team car, maybe to let the team manager know that he just couldn't keep hold of the handlebars and he was going to have to pull out. A pity really, because this man had excellent form after the recent 3 days of La Panne. He showed us that there, and that will be a serious problem I think later on for the Lotto squad, because they're losing one of their very strong riders who should have been in there with a chance to help Peter Van Petegem.
Yes, they're losing a couple of good names, especially with Schmil also out for the moment, and Van Petegem losing a valuable pacemaker too. Now, as we look down from the helicopter, well, we can't follow it by hot air balloon. We simply wouldn't keep up, because this race is going very quickly today in perfect conditions. The wind is helpful at the moment, but they will swing around and it will become unhelpful towards the end. Roborst now, and these look like the two chasers, Paul, and well, we haven't got an exact time check on them, but there's plenty of cars in the gap, so they still have a healthy... No, they haven't. In fact, those cars have got themselves in a rather embarrassing situation.
Well, that's not a very good call by the judges there. I don't think the referees, who normally keep the gap between the different groups as clear as possible, but what's happened here is the main field has accelerated so dramatically that they've pulled back 4 or 5 minutes on those two riders in no time at all.
Drinks all round, at least amongst the Lotto boys. Hold on tight over that railroad crossing, because that's the easiest way to lose your drinking bottle. And their job is plain now. They've got to keep this pressure on for as long as they physically can. I don't think they're counting on finishing this year's Tour of Flanders, but they will be there in time to see, they hope, Peter Van Petegem sprint to victory. Well, we'll see. We're still a little way away from that. These are the two leaders now. Somehow they got rid of those cars in as quick as that. I don't know where they've gone, but these two have been picked up. Jon Odriozola from iBenesto.com and Rafael Diaz Justo from the Once team. Back in the pack.
I've got to take away what I just said about those judges, quick, because they cleared that out. I didn't think there was any possibility of getting those cars out of that gap at all, and it happened in almost 1 kilometre. So well done the judges there to get that sorted out. The race is being kept and controlled by radio. All of the team referees are in contact all of the time. They're completely in communication, and that's how they manage to keep the race as clean and as safe as possible out on the course. There is Stefano Zanini in about 5th place there, looking very comfortable indeed. Very strong, this man. He won the opening stage of the 3 days of La Panne, but he really couldn't do anything in that final individual time trial against Peter Van Petegem. There is Johan Museo in the light blue jersey as well. So all of the big names now, Phil, starting to move forward. And look at this. Ludo Dirksen, come on boys, let's have a good go. 5 kilometres now for them to the Molenberg.
You remember last year, Paul, he just attacked every time the road went up, and it looks as though he's about to do the same again. He's lining up for the Molenberg. with 15.5 minutes to make on the 4 leaders. And Dirksen again cannot be controlled. He is a tremendously strong man. He's not the most clever tactical rider, but my goodness me, on his day he's strong.
But that's what makes it much more dramatic to watch a bike race like this. Ludo Dirksen doesn't use an awful lot of tactics. He just pounds away at the race. He just wants to dynamite the race, blow it to pieces, and he goes out and attacks on every one of the climbs. And I think he's got great condition again today. And let's just see how he reacts when we get to the big climbs in a short while. But it is important right now to go round that corner in about 4 kilometers time in the first 10 positions or so, because as we saw earlier with the leading group of 4, the Molenberg is very narrow indeed, and that rider there from Rabobank is trying to steal a slight advantage over the group.
He's hooked up to the back of our motorbike at least for a second before we get out of the way. He's one of the younger members of the Rabobank team. This, it could well be Karsten Kroon having a little go. I don't think it's Matt Heyman, the Aussie, and in fact it is Karsten Kroon who's gone clear.
A clever move this. He's going to try and get himself 50 or 100 meters advantage, so he'll go around the corner there into the Molenberg in first place. But you know, the speed of the main field right now, it's very difficult to stay off the front, because we're picking up our average speed now in the group to around about 47, 48 kilometers an hour. As we look back there, they've given him a certain advantage for the moment, but they will speed up dramatically as we get closer to the Molenberg. The time gap, as you can see at the top there, is still coming down slowly but surely to 15.5 minutes. But when we get to the big climbs, that will come down in minutes at a time rather than just seconds.
I don't think they'll react to Karsten Kroon's attack. He was a long-time leader in the Giro d'Italia King of the Mountains competition. He's a good rider and deserved of some success, but he plays mostly the domestique for what is a highly successful Dutch team these days. But remember, they're without World Cup holder Eric Decker, sadly out, hopefully back for the Tour de France following his crash in Milan-San Remo. So the main field will have to rely on others, and not least, of course, in the upcoming big tours, they'll look for Levi Leipheimer, their new member from the US, to do them a good turn there. Inside 15.5 minutes now, and the peloton weighing up their chances as we head on to the mole. Oh, there's been another crash at the back here, and that one has taken out 1 or 2 good riders as well, because looking down there's one of the Aqua Saponi riders who's gone down, and this should be the Russian champion, I think, Paul, who's crashed. And if it is the Russian champion for Aqua Saponi, it'll be I think it's Martin de Gank, is it, who's gone down?
This is Thierry Maréchal as well. Let's just see how that happened. You see what's happening. A couple of riders are trying to move forward here. It is always very difficult, especially when you're switching across the road there, and 4 or 5 riders have gone down. Thierry Maréchal is the rider standing up there in the red, but there's also an SCS Tiscali rider gone down as well, but this is not looking very good at all. The race doctor is right in there at the moment, and I have a feeling that this young man will not be back in the Tour of Flanders today, but almost certainly he'll be taking a lift to the hospital, which is not too far away from the road.
Well, let's hope that he's not too badly hurt either. I think Max van Heeswijk was the Domo rider who was on the floor. But either way, they're not going to get back to this group, because they've now started to turn the screw that little bit tighter.
1 or 2 riders trying to get themselves. In fact, you can see there that the Rabobank rider who leapt off the front there, he's been brought back into the fold. Karsten Kroon tried to get himself an advantage, but that's not going to happen. Now look at this, the big organisation of the Pink Telecom train moving forward right now. They want to make sure that their men, Eric Zabel and Stefan Weserman, get around that corner very smartly indeed. Everybody fighting to stay in that arrowhead at the front end of the main field, but you can see the pressure now starting to come in as we get that big long line of riders tailing out at the back of the peloton. Very shortly, now this is a very dangerous moment here, because the Molenberg, you come charging down this big wide road and you turn right into a very narrow little street, and that's where very often in the past we've seen corners, we've seen crashes in that corner, and let's hope that that's not going to happen today. But that's why all of the big leaders now are starting to move forward.
Well, a lot of riders still trying to come back from that delay, and I think most of them are getting back except the fallers. That last line is just about to close the door, but it's going to take a big effort by that one rider to shut it down, but he's done it now as they all come back together. You can see the speed over the ground of the peloton. They are moving now very quickly as we approach the 15-minute gap. So they've taken 4 minutes off those breakaways since the first climb of the Molenberg, as the leaders themselves are heading out to the Wolverberg.
This is almost like a bunch sprint right now. That corner is so important at this stage of the game. It is really as if you do have to sprint for it. And there we are, turning a right here. It's not too far away from the Molenberg right now, about 1.5 kilometers. But the pressure is absolutely amazing at the front end of that main field. I just saw a few moments ago, it was almost completely organized. And then there was a big group of riders came up from the left-hand side and swamped the men on the front. So they've got to fight their way forward once again. But the pressure now and the speed is very much up as we go through St. Maria Horbeck. That's around about 1.5 kilometers from the right-hand bend, and still lots of pink jerseys on the front. Also moving forward, looking after Peter van Petegem, is in round about 5th or 6th position. The Lotto riders are doing an absolutely superb job right now. There's Jackie Durand on the right-hand side for the Française des Jeux. He knows the Tour of Flanders. He's won it before, but not from the main field, that was for sure. That was a very long breakaway situation that survived and caused one of the big surprises of the Tour of Flanders. But maybe not so, because Jackie Durand has also come up with some big wins like Paris-Roubaix as well.
So the peloton arriving at the Molenberg, where we've just been with the leaders. But that was some 15 minutes ago since they went over the top. While the leaders head out towards the Wolverberg. Now let's see how the peloton reacts here. They've certainly worked hard to hold the position at the front. Lotto have done well, so too have Telecom. But now look at the queue at the back of the peloton as the leaders already out of the saddle making the climb. This is when it really hurts now. And this is Peter van Petegem now, one of the hot favourites for Belgium. This is what he wanted, Paul. This is why he's used his team. Now he's got a clear sight of the climbs. They've done a good job for him. Meanwhile, at the back, it's all sorts of chaos. And very often those boys will no longer see the peloton at the front now.
Look at this, Zabel in 3rd place. He's looking pretty good as well. But Van Petegem had the team do exactly what they wanted. Van Petegem is not going to win the Tour of Flanders with this climb today, but almost certainly he's going to make sure that he doesn't lose it, because one or two of those riders, as you said, Phil, will probably not see the front end of the main field again. This is a brilliant piece of riding as well by Team Telecom to move Eric Zabel up there. Zabel, I think, surprised everybody last year in this bike race by getting himself up there towards the finish, and he's the kind of rider who, if he can get himself into a group of 5 or 10, could be a winner here of the Ronde van Vlaanderen today. There's the time gap. You can see at 105 kilometers to go, that's around about 2.5 hours of racing. The time is coming down very dramatically now. In another 8 kilometers time, these guys will be hitting the Wolfenberg. But before they go there, they've got a nice little stretch of cobblestones at Volkerhem.
Well, I think that was Ralph Grabsch of Telecom who's got to the front. Here's the boys who had to queue, just about to get on at the back again. Just looking down the bunch there to see if there's anybody jumping out of this. Back with the leaders now on the climb of the Wolverberg. Another big crowd here. The thing about the Tour of Flanders, if you know the roads here well, you can zigzag around and watch the riders in a number of places. So only the 4th time on this climb. A little bit of picture breakup. They're live pictures. 105 kilometers to go. They look to be climbing this with a little bit more sense, I think, as they make their way up towards the summit. Just to remind you of the names: Alexis Rodriguez, Ronnie Schultz, Jan Kijks and Erwin Thijs of the Palmans team. He's sat at the back here. It's the Kelme rider is Rodriguez, Vlaanderen is Kijks, and Schultz rides for Gerolsteiner, rider in the white up there.
Well, the energy's going out of these guys pedaling action, because they now know where they are in this bike race. They know that they're about to start the very repetitive nature of all these small cobbled climbs. They know that the main field will be accelerating. They know just exactly how the race is going to unfold. They've finished the 2nd climb of the day, and that leaves 14 climbs left here in the Tour of Flanders. And these riders very shortly will go through the feeding station, the 2nd feeding station of the day. And then very soon after that, they will hit the Mont de l'Encluc, the Knokteberg, and then the Old Quaremont. The Old Quaremont is the next point, I think, where the main field will really start to put the hammer down, because habitually the race splits up there with groups of 15 or 20 getting clear, and then it's a scramble to try and recover and get back into the front of the main race before we go to the Patersburg. And then this year we're going to have the Koppenberg coming back into the race for the first time in about 15 years.
So after the leads have gone over Wolvenberg, the gap comes down to just on 14 minutes. There's the average speed, 39 kilometers an hour. Very quick tempo indeed today for the Tour of Flanders, in perfect conditions for a bike race. It's not warm, but it is sunny, and I'm sure the riders are quite warm at the moment. But as always, we've seen a lot of crashes back in that main field. Only the strong men are surviving at the head of the peloton, poised for the big jumps which will come on the climbs. We are at the moment for the peloton 4 hills away from the old Quaremont. We haven't seen that in the Tour of Flanders for 15 years. As we're watching now, Erik Zabel here, and Hoffman just off the front. Zabel's gone out for the ride, I think. Tristan Hoffman, a very good rider to go with, very strong. Interesting move, Paul. I'm not sure why Erik has done this.
Obviously, Hoffman was the man who attacked, and Zabel was at the front of the main field and decided this Hoffman is a big, strong boy. I think I might go with him. They're looking for the possibility maybe of a split on the next climb, the Wolvenberg, and then they would have a nice group off the front of the main field. Last year, Hoffman was 5th in the Tour of Flanders. 2 years ago, he was 5th in the Tour of Flanders. He's a very good bike rider, and I think very much appreciated on the TSC Tiscali team. He's now looking over his shoulders, and they can see the front end of the main field not too far behind them.
Well, the way this race is going today, you know, you could find that strong riders come up rather than these two go back. This is how it happened. Hoffman was the man who put in the surge. He loves the Tour of Flanders. Apart from the 5th Paul's mentioned, he's also had a 7th place. So he knows this race very well. He knows how much he enjoys riding it. He had a marvellous season in the year 2000. He was a real challenger in the World Cup race. And so he's gone clear. And Zabel opted to go after him. Now that what they'll hope for is that a group does join them. They won't be anticipating 102 kilometres, certainly not on the roads that lay ahead today, because we're looking at still 2 or 3 hours in the saddle, a little over 3 hours to go. 14 minutes now, precisely.
Zabel looks very good here right now. These guys, I think, are quite surprised to have got themselves a 200-metre gap that quickly. Zabel not doing too much work right now. I think he was quite happy to cover the move, but as you say, I don't think he's looking forward to riding a long breakaway of 102 kilometres. They'll try and stay clear now to the Wolvenberg and hope maybe that over the next section of cobblestones at Volkerhem, followed by that climb, that there's a split at the front end of the main field and we may well see 20 or 30 riders going clear. But Zabel, I think, in excellent form this year. A brilliant bike rider, this man. You really have to appreciate him because he's one of the rare bike riders in this day and age who, like Laurent Jalabert or like Sean Kelly in the past, is competitive from the very first bike race of the year right the way through until the very last one.
Yeah, he's deservedly the #1 bike rider because that's exactly what he is right now, Erik Zabel. He's never afraid to make an effort, and you know, his sprinting this year has been good but not great. So I'm wondering if the twitch fibers are perhaps finally on the wane, but he's been right up there in the action since day 1 of the season. Now he's looking over to see if anybody's coming out to play today, because he would certainly like it. We still appear to have Karsten Kroon up there, although this time now I think he's on these two, because Kroon, I think, came back into the group as we were climbing over the Molenberg.
Well, this is pretty interesting. In fact, our motorbikers stopped here to see how far behind the main field are, and they obviously have let those two riders go off the front of the main field, because you can see by the way the main field is riding there's absolutely and utterly no reaction at all. And that is quite good for Erik Zabel, because they will now be able to build up an advantage of a minute or so over the main field. But immediately we say that there's an attack coming again from the Rabobank riders. They're obviously today trying to find Kroon again, who's decided he too wants to look for that breakaway situation.
Well, it proved 1 point, Paul. He was back in the pack, because he's out of it again now, trying to get on terms. Much better chance now if he can get across to Erik Zabel, because Kroon is a very strong rider, and 3 of them up there could alter the face of this race. If they start working together, and there's no notice yet that Zabel is actually helping Hoffman, I think Erik wants to see whether this is going to be worth trying for or not. But if they do get away once the hills start, and then the main pack... Oh, what's happened here on the corner? This is another fall here. I didn't catch his number, but one of the Telecom riders has gone down, and that's rather a nasty shunt. But it looked to me as though it was possibly Andreas Kleyer. I don't think. Here it is again. It wasn't one of the top Telecom riders. In fact, it was Ralf Grabsch who went down, they're saying. Yes, it is indeed. Ralf Grabsch, 102. Well, that's bad luck.
Again, it just makes you realize how important it is to ride at the front end of this main field. The front end right now is controlled by the light blue jerseys of US Postal Service. This is Antonio Cruz on the front of these cobblestones. Kasseien, by the way, there, 3,000 meters is the Flemish word for cobblestones. There's Danilo Hondo there in 4th position. George Hincapie there is in 3rd. Very confident riding at the front end of the main field. I think the whole of the team here feel that Hincapie's got a great chance of winning this race today, and if not, he's got a good crack at winning Paris-Roubaix in a week's time. There is Ludo Dirksens as well, riding pretty close to the front. He's very much at home on this kind of situation. He really does like to ride on the cobblestones, and he really adores this race. There's Kroon. He very soon will be back in the fold, but he has tried to get himself off the front and chase that breakaway with Erik Zabel.
Yes, he's going to be caught, and it's interesting that in fact Postal have decided that Zabel is a danger, and they've started to work and chase him down as we go inside 100 kilometers from the finish. Now I must confess, one of the new riders on US Postal, Tom Boonen, I think that's him on the front at the moment, but he's becoming already a recognised star in the team. They really respect what they see as a great new talent in cycling, and they've put him on this team, and that's him now riding on the front, the big tall man. Well, how about that for confidence, Paul, in your first Tour of Flanders?
21 years of age, almost certainly he must feel very excited. Not only is he a Belgian riding the Tour of Flanders, but he's riding on a team here who's got a very good chance of taking out the victory. He knows that George Hincapie is in good form, and it's always good for the youngsters on the team to be able to ride alongside Lance Armstrong. There is Chippo, and there's another incident at the back there. A few more riders have gone down. Oh. It really is now starting to hot up at the rear end of the main field. A lot of riders suffering here.
They certainly are, and right in the distance I thought I saw somebody standing by the roadside. So these boys have been caught out yet again. This is Kurt van Lendegem of the Landbouw Credit Team, one of the small second division teams, now saying goodbye to the main field in the Tour of Flanders today as they continue to get slung off the back over the cobblestones. When pedal as fast as they can, they just simply can't hold the wheel in front. And it's a young Belgian rider riding for US Postal, Tom Boonen, who's causing the damage here, and he's driving tremendously well. Look, he spotted his mates on the roadside. He's just had a little wave there. Well, he really is confident. He's done what he wanted to do. He's been seen at the front by his fans.
Quite good to have a Belgian on the team, because you see that little sign there. He indicated that the pavement was coming up, and he indicated that to Lance Armstrong, and he was telling Armstrong, we got a chance here to ride on the comfortable side of the road. Now there are the two men who took off a few moments ago, Tristan Hoffman and Erik Zabel. But it really is good to see how strong this US Postal Service team is here, and you can see the chaos as everybody now is scrambling to get onto a smooth bit of road. That's Andrea Taffy on the right hand side there for Mappé. Not great form this year, probably in his last year as a professional cyclist. He had hoped to be on absolute form for these races, but I think Andrea gets very much more psyched up for next week's Paris-Roubaix race, where he hopes he'll be able to get himself a second win.
You see the way here as Zabel comes back into the pack now, and that's all down to the chase of US Postal. Lance Armstrong was initiating there the attack from the team, and again another crash here. These are dangerous roads right now as they dodge around, and delayed this time in the group is Floyd Landis. Now he has come into this race, in fact, because of the disqualification from the team, the sacking of Gianpaolo Mondini after he confessed before he came to US Postal to using the drug EPO, and they've simply said, well, you know the rules, we don't tolerate it, and you're fired. And so a phone call actually brought in Floyd Landis. An interesting tale this, Paul. He was out training when his mobile phone rang, and he was told to come over to the Tour of Flanders. So he said to his training partners, I've got to turn around, guys, I'm going to Belgium. And that's exactly what he did.
Well, the days of the modern technology nowadays is really quite remarkable, and these guys are always in communication even when they're out on the bike. That looks very much like Ludo Dirksen's at the front there.
Yeah, it will
deciding to put the hammer down a little bit and make it quite difficult. Armstrong up there in about 4th or 5th place. Very happy to come back to the Tour of Flanders, and I don't think he's been here, Phil, since 1995, when he really was regarded very much as a one-day classics rider.
Yes.
But since then, everything has changed in his life. He's got over the cancer that he was struck by. He's won the Tour de France 3 times, but he still, I think, in the back of his mind knows that he's capable of winning any one of these one-day races that he wants to.
Well, he's a solid man. In fact, he's staying in our hotel, Paul, so we can get the best story off him when he finishes. But at breakfast this morning, he was very cool. He came down last to breakfast, never spoke to anybody. He was all psyched up for his day in Flanders, and we knew this would happen because he's this sort of rider. And Max Chandra, his teammate, is probably worrying what he might do next, because you never know with Ludo. There he goes, a stage winner in the Tour de France, former champion of Belgium, turned professional very late in life, and now we're heading towards a 14-minute time gap to the 4 leaders. But these boys know those 4 leaders will not survive the passage of the day.
big strong boy there. He's opened up a massive advantage there over the Volkerhem cobblestones. Very shortly, in about 2 kilometers, he'll be coming up to the Wolvenberg. And he again, Phil, I don't think trying to ride himself alone to the finish. What he's trying to do right now is to open up an advantage and hope there's a split off the front end of the main field when we come to the next climb of the day. But then for around about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so, we should have a little bit of a relaxation in the main field as the guys take on board their food at the second feeding station and get ready then for the biggest assault of all of the big climbs which will come. And I've always felt that the real start of the Tour of Flanders is at the Old Quaremont, because that climb, although itself not very steep, really breaks the field as they go over the top. This is Robbie Hunter on the front here right now. Very comfortable, I think, now that he's riding for Mappé. A team that has given him the confidence, the team that actually has confidence in him as well. I think he felt when he rode for Lamprey that they never really supported him. He was treated as a foreigner on the team and never really given the chance to shine as he can. And he's proving this year that he's going to be a super talent, I think, for South Africa.
Yes, I asked him this morning if he was still talking to his teammates as he was standing next door to his ex-teammates Lamprey on the line today. He said yes, he chats to everybody, but he's very happy to be with Mappé. And he's driving, he's found himself in the right position here, I'm sure not by accident, as we now get on to the Wolvenberg for the peloton. The new team on the block that's riding extremely well is Phonak, strengthened over the winter, and now a team to be respected. They've come through the ranks of cycling. Now it's the top team in Switzerland.
And it also has an American link as well, because in fact Jim Okowitz is a consultant to the Phonak team and helps them set up all of their programs throughout the year. Jim, really good to see that he's been involved in the cycling and managed to keep himself involved in the international sport at the top level as well, because Jim, even today, is a super enthusiast, isn't he, Phil, when it comes down to these one-day races.
And to all of you listening, don't recommend you go cycling with him, because the man is so strong on a bike. But he wouldn't be any good on this climb. We'd get rid of him on the climb, I think, Paul.
That's the one thing that Jim doesn't like, is when the race goes uphill. But anyway, he certainly will be excited. He's actually out on the course today with some friends, getting in the atmosphere of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. And I spoke to him just before the start, and he was just as excited as when he was a team manager.
Well,
he's got a lot of confidence.
Paul, that yesterday he rode the last 100 kilometres of this course, which is the sector with all of the climbs in. So he had a very good day yesterday and provided us with a lot of useful information, I must confess. There we are, 95 kilometres from the finish. And we're just on the top now of the Wolvenberg for the main pack, which are now under the control of Antonio Cruz of US Postal. And the strong men are still here. We've seen Cipollini, we've seen Hincapie, Robbie Hunter, Lance Armstrong. I'd like to see more of Van Petegem and Museo, but I'm convinced they are still up here. This man is causing concern, as he will all the way to the finish, Ludo Dierksens. He's seen the top of the Wolvenberg. Now he's waiting for the peloton, and I'm sure he'll go again as soon as we get to the Kleisberg, which is also known as the Mont Le Clou.
I've got a feeling Robbie Hunter's not riding this race for a high finish in the overall standings. He looks as if he's been given the orders from the team to do a lot of work. They obviously got a lot of confidence in Stefano Zanini, who is the man on form. He led the 3 days of La Panna after winning the opening stage and only lost it in the final individual time trial. So it would seem as if Mappé's plan today is to look after men like Andrea Taffy and Zanini, and Robbie Hunter, the young man coming into the team today, I think, having to bend to team rules.
Well, that's often the way. Certainly poor old Tom Steele's having a rough ride. Don't know where he is in the course right now, because he's had a flat tire and he's been involved in a delay as well. The gap now 13 minutes and counting. So we're coming back slowly to the 4 leaders. Nice little sharp descent here, but watch the bends on these steep little descents. These narrow roads of Flanders, where all of Belgian cycling was formed over 100 years ago now. The oldest classic is Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but remember that is in the French Ardennes, and we're now riding here in the Flemish Ardennes, a totally different country altogether, although it's the same country, Belgium, but one side speaks French and the other side speaks Flemish. Now we get a chance to see this breakaway rider here from Phonak, and it is Matthias Buxhofer. I nearly stuck my neck out and said it was. It's a typical move by Buxhofer, who's gone clear. 13.23, he's looking to close down. He'd like a little bit of help, but as has been the case these last few kilometres, those who attack don't get any help. They simply get swept up by the field.
They're about 10 kilometres to the second feed. Then after that, a further 10 kilometers, they've got the climb of the Klausberg, or the Mont de l'Enclos as it's called in French. And that's when these guys, you can see even the difference in the speed of the main field right now compared to the 4 leaders who we saw a few moments ago. They are riding around about 7 or 8 kilometers an hour faster than the men at the front of the bike race. They've led that bike race since 28 kilometers. The race was formed by a breakaway of 2 riders who were then chased by 2 riders, and they became a 4-man lead group 34 kilometers into the race. So they've been at the head of affairs for an awful long time now, and they were starting to be feeling the fatigue that creeps into your body, having used a huge gear over the flat part of the course, and they're not able anymore, Phil, to pick up the pace to the kind of speeds that you need to stay off the front. And I think the main field, just for a little moment now, are putting up the white flag, but not for too long. Only another 15 kilometers or so, and we get to the very crucial repetitive nature of all of these climbs.
Here we go. Feeding time at the zoo for the riders now. They've swept up Buxhofer as he goes back in the pack, but somebody again has put the hammer down just a fraction more as they start to string out once more. But the big teams all of the time, Paul, Rabobank, Mappe, US Postal, Domo, they are the ones that are doing the driving now at the head of this field, trying to get something going as we head up towards the Kleisberg, which is a nasty little climb. It'll be the steepest we've tackled of the 3 so far, and it's been in the Tour of Flanders, by the way, since 1955. It's one of the old favourites, this, and it's not too far away. When they get to it, we'll be having just 83 kilometres to go. So, as you can see, 9 kilometres from the climb.
Andrea Taffy looking very confident there too. It's all back together right now, but all of the time we keep forgetting that those 4 leaders are in front, and now by just 13 minutes. It's come down around about 6 minutes over the last 20 kilometers or so. And again, Karsten Kroon trying to get himself off the front. It's always very dangerous, this part of Europe as well, for racing, because there are a lot of these little directional islands and ornamental central reservations, which as the race splits up, if you're not paying attention, you can find yourself riding very smartly into one of those road signs, and I tell you what, they don't bend.
No, they don't. But fortunately, the riders at the moment are managing to miss out on all of the road furniture. All looking now at somebody else to have a go, but there's no shortage of riders wanting to attack. They sense the lull and off they go to see if they can start the move. As we're looking now at a little flurry of attacks off the front of the bunch. Again, the big teams represented, Telecom sending their man up in the second wave. Chance to catch up. Française de Jeu is here. They're riding on a high, the French team this year. Feeling very confident they'll get a wild card into the Tour de France. I'd be very surprised if they don't, because they've had a very good start to the season. They brought in the British rider Bradley Wiggins today because they've lost their Australian sprinter Baden Cook. He's taken ill, so Wiggins has got the call up, as you will have seen earlier, and it looks as though this little breakaway is going to be swept up in any case. As we go inside 13 minutes to the leaders, we're just on 58, 59 miles to the finish, 91 kilometers. A little bit of a drag here. They're keeping over to the right of the road on the smooth sector. Just a little stretch of cobblestones, only a couple of 100 meters for those that are unlucky enough to have to ride them.
Small climb here called the Edelaar. And I tell you what, these little climbs are not even marked on the map as the climbs, the 16 climbs which are categorized. That's the amazing thing about race organizations. They advertise the fact that there are 16 climbs, but there are probably about 25 or 30 climbs which are just as difficult out on the course but don't get any recognition. You can see the urgency now, all of these riders moving forward all of the time, trying to get themselves into a situation where there is a split off the front end of the main field. We're getting closer and closer now to the feeding station, then after that we really get into the real nitty-gritty of the first big climb of the day. It is quite amazing. Once they've gone over the Klausbergen, the Knokterberg, Old Quaremont and Patersberg are within 10 kilometers of each other, so you've got to climb every 2 to 3 kilometers, and it really doesn't give you very much time to have a mechanical incident and recover and get back into the bike race.
Into the road junction there at Lerpegem. That was Ralph Huser of Team Coast who was setting the pace. Drop back a little bit now. Team Coast trying to re-establish themselves after a terrible season last year. The change of management there now with Juan Fernandez, the director sportif, and also the German rider, a German rider who's helping them out too, who has done very well indeed. But I think it's an organisation now that can go places, and it's nice to see Alex Ullett is also riding that little bit better.
It's good to see Zuller riding well towards the end of his career as well. I think he's now starting to enjoy his bike riding again, having got over all of that, those problems with Festina. I think he's managed to put them all behind him, and then psychologically I think Alex Zuller has found a little bit more stability, and I think is enjoying the bike racing with Team Koos for probably his last couple of years as a professional. But going back here to the main field, you can see how much pressure there is on in this main field, Phil. There's a big long line at the front end. You can see people still trying to get off the front. This is Taffy again.
Yeah.
This man again, very much like Ludo Dirksen's, not a great tactician here as we come around the outside of Oudenaarde. But Taffy, like Ludo Dirksen's, just likes to hammer away at the front end of the main field. He attacks and attacks and attacks till people get fed up and let him go.
Well, 12:42 the gap as we roll on gently towards the major hills around.
As we look at the Kop van der Wegstrijd, the 4 leaders still holding on to around about 12 minutes advantage right now, and they're starting the climb here of the Klausberg. It's rated with 3 stars, it's 6%, and it plunges down on the other side, and they then ride around the back of the same hill and then come up to the Knokteberg. And this is now, you can see, looking at the pedaling action of these guys, Phil, they really are starting to pay for the efforts of having been off the front of this bike race from the 34th kilometre. This is where the main field will charge up here. It's a beautiful day for these Belgian spectators to come out here and really enjoy this bike race, which is one of their biggest sporting events of the year. And they really are enjoying this early season spring weather. It's been like this in Belgium for the last 15 days or so, which really is quite remarkable. In the past, we've seen so many times when the Tour of Flanders, in fact, it's out go the lights here for the Kelme rider when we hit this big climb of the Klausberg. He's been at the front end of the bike race, and the work being done on the front there is the Polman's rider, that's Erwin Thijs. And you can see these riders now really are starting to pay the price of having been at the front of the bike race. But one thing they have achieved is the ability to get themselves an awful lot of publicity for their teams. The man going out of the back right now is Koos. He rides for Vlaanderen 2002 team. Just leaving it at the front there, the Gerolsteiner rider, Ronnie Schultz in the white jersey, and Erwin Thijs on the front. 31 years of age, Erwin Thijs, a very experienced bike rider. I have a feeling, though, that the Vlaanderen rider should be able to just stay in contact over the summit of the climb. They're here on the top now of the Klausbergen. And if we look back, we'll get a chance to see there is the Kelme rider, Rodriguez, suffering a little bit on this first really serious, tough climb.
Yes, and it's only the 4th of 16 climbs in today's Tour of Flanders. So he really is going to find the rest of the race extremely difficult now. Once he loses the gap of the leaders, he might well reclaim it this time, but it'll only be a temporary recovery, I'm sure of that. Klausberg, first coming in 1955 into the Tour of Flanders. And there is a regrouping of the peloton here as they reorganize themselves. It's rather like the British horse race, the Grand National. This, it's you survive as long as you can at the front until your legs give out. Bonjour having a little dig at the front now.
Everybody getting very nervous right now because they know that this is the time when the race really does start to explode. And everybody looking for a chance to get themselves off the front. And there's Chippo still up there in 3rd or 4th position. He's looking very confident today, very comfortable. I would say very happy with the weather conditions too, because we know that our Mario, he's not the toughest of guys when it comes to the really bad weather conditions that can reign over the northern part of Europe at this time of the year. But I think obviously super motivated by the fact that he's got this World Cup leaders jersey on his shoulders, and he's looking pretty smart and in good condition right now.
Yes, the Fassa Bortola riders too are thinking of Michele Bartoli. We haven't seen anything of him actually, Paul. Mario Cipollini off to the left. This rider here is Dmitry Konishev, our man from the Tour de France days. First ever Russian rider to lead in the King of the Mountains competition. First ever Russian professional medalist too, which he got a medal at Chambéry when Greg LeMond was the world champion.
Well, he's one of those riders who for the last few years, Phil, has been promising to retire at the end of every season, but he still seems to be coming back for more. And I think very often these guys, when they get to the end of their careers, they feel as if they're a little bit more relaxed, and sometimes that tends to put a couple of years onto a guy's career. 14 climbs left to go in the Ronde van Vlaanderen. The next one is going to be the Knokteberg. But for these riders here, they still have to tackle the Klausberg, which the leading group of 4 riders went over a couple of minutes ago.
And let's look at these riders now. The peloton is still determined not to be split up by the course today. They have these nice runs around good highway before they go off onto the side streets again and onto the cobble sections of the roads. And if they can just hang on and sort themselves out, they might feel a little bit better when the climbs start. The Knokterberg is still, the Kleisberg is still ahead of the peloton. The Knokterberg is the challenge now for the leaders. And for the moment, at least, with a lot of confusion at the back of the race, are hanging on to their deficit, Paul. It's not descending quite as quickly as it was.
No, but I think once we get into the big climbs, the old Quaremont, we'll see that time gap there jumping down by a couple of minutes at a time.
Rabobank still charging on. Driven on by Karsten Kroon here. Again, he's been very, very active, trying to get something going, but they keep reeling him in. Looks like, is that Robbie Hunter in his slipstream? No, it's not. Yes, it is it? He's a policeman and doesn't want to help too much, but he's going to give him a little go at the moment.
Everybody hoping for the chance to get to the foot of these hills with a big advantage. The big plan for a lot of these guys, if they can just get off the front end of the main field, is what they hope for, is that a group of 15 or 20 riders split off over one of these climbs and they get swept up in the general momentum of the race as it starts to accelerate. Hunter now has decided he would go forward to try and give Mappé the advantage of having more riders at the front end of the bike race. And I think he's settled in very quickly to being an integral part of the Mappé squad. A couple more guys trying to get across here. Looks like that could be Nicolas Jalabert, the rider there from TSC World Online, and a Rabobank rider getting in there as well. But still, the main field very rapid at the front here. Still, US Postal putting a lot of riders to the front here, and I think maybe a little bit too early at the moment, but that's the right time to keep your men at the front as we go into this very early part of all the strategic climbs that really reign over the last 60 kilometers of this bike race, the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Karsten Kroon and Robbie Hunter just off the front of the main field.
Yes, now Hunter's you're obviously right what you said earlier, Paul, that he doesn't seem to be riding to win this race. He's riding with other things in mind here, because here's the sprinter driving on. He says his form is good, and you never know on a Tour of Flanders, because once we get into the fast succession of the climbs, if you are in a leading position and you are on good form, then you can live with it, because Ludo Dierksen did just that last year, and the breakaway finally did stay away.
That's obviously what Robbie Hunter is hoping for just now, but he obviously realizes that the heads of state of Team Mappé are in the main field right now. Men like Andrea Tafi have won World Cup races before, and Stefano Zanini, who's in absolutely superb condition, which we saw just a few days ago in the 3 days of La Panna. Probably the best condition he's had for an awful long time. He's ridden well in these tough one-day classics before. He's finished 4th in Paris-Roubaix. He's the kind of rider who, as well, he's been looking for a huge win for many, many years right now, and this may well be the season that he's going to do it. But I think the super tactician, Johan Museeuw, is the man that all of these riders will not be too worried about until we get to the latter part of the race, because Museeuw has the knack, Phil, of staying in the main field, staying near the front of the main field, but never getting his nose into the wind until it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, absolutely right. He's a great tactician. Even when he's in a breakaway, you somehow seem to miss him, and the riders seem to have the same problem with Johan. He is a very, very crafty rider, but there the gap is now inside 11 minutes. And this, we're looking down on Karsten Kroon, who is leading Robbie Hunter here, and he said Robbie McEwen. Oh, now they're saying it's Matthew Heyman, another Australian here for Rabobank. So this is another group that's got himself off the front. Here they are.
Well, it's a good move there. They're looking over their shoulder. Paul van Heefter moving across from the Lotto team this year during the winter transfer season to join CSC Tiscali World Online, the team of Laurent Jalabert. Jalabert not riding this race, but his brother Nicolas is in there. That's the third group of riders on the road. Matt Heyman, he's also had a very good start to the season, Phil, I reckon, this year, and he's a man that I think has settled in very quickly to be an integral part of the Rabobank squad. There's the main field. They don't have too much of an advantage, and they will get very quickly swept up once the road tilts up, and it will do that in around about a kilometre or so when they reach the first slopes of the Klausberg or the Mont de l'Enclus. And it's still Antonio Cruz on the front there. Obviously, US Postal, not only do they want to dominate the world of international cycling, Phil, not only in races like the Tour de France, but they feel now they've got a team that can be competitive even in the World Cup one-day races. And Hincapie is in around about 6th or 7th place there, and Lance Armstrong too is riding very close to the front. Armstrong, I think, enjoying his return to the Tour of Flanders. He always enjoys the big occasions, and certainly the Tour of Flanders is a huge occasion. There's Matty White in 3rd position.
Well, Paul, look at this now. US Postal are taking this race so seriously. We would never have seen them ride like this without the presence of Lance Armstrong.
Absolutely not, and I think that's why he came along here, because, you know, he's seen the races on TV in the past where George Hincapie has been completely isolated in races like the Tour of Flanders and the Paris-Roubaix race, and he's come today and he's raised the morale of the whole troop. We've seen this happen at the Tour de France, but now he's decided his presence was required here. He's the general of this team, and that's why he's come up here, and it may well be that it's going to put an awful lot of responsibility on Georgie Hincapie's shoulders to try and win himself the Tour of Flanders. He got, I think, a lot of confidence last year, Phil, when he won Wevelgem, because that proved to him finally that he is a rider for the big one-day races, and I think he really enjoys this kind of race. Now there's Heyman and Paul van Heeft coming back into the fold as we expected, and you can see by the pedaling action now that they have reached the early slopes of the Klausberg.
Yes, and this is showing on the screen there, 81 kilometers to go, means that the 4 leaders are already 2 kilometers over the top of this climb, and the gap is down to 10 minutes and a single second now. But this is a very impressive performance today by US Postal. They have driven this race on when it matters. Now, they've ridden a lot like this year as well. And Fred Rodriguez, in the US Champions jersey with the stars and stripes, is taking full advantage of the hard work being done by the American team. But he'll be looking to lead Johan Museo and even himself to the line today.
Well, Rodriguez had a pretty tough year last year. Apart from the national championships, he really did seem to struggle for the form that he had a couple of years ago. But coming up second in Milan-San Remo will have given him an awful lot of confidence as well. There is Stefan Weissermann on the left-hand side, but Armstrong, amazing that face of his, Phil. It's complete and utter concentration.
It is, isn't it?
When this guy comes out, and bear in mind this is his 5th day of racing this year, this is the kind of performance we never would have expected possible in previous years. And look at Matt White's face. Ooh, that shows the pain that the Mont de l'Enclos is giving these riders as we look at the back end of the main field, and that's Jackie Durand, a former winner of this bike race.
Yeah, it's fabulous riding this, and Matty White there, the workhorse of US Postal, the Australian from Sydney, is driving it on at the front now, giving it his best shot here to keep them in contention, to make it hard for those who can follow. Rodriguez has recovered from his little journey over the Kleisberg. He's back in the action here, back up with the 4 leaders. There are the names for you as we're heading out towards the Konokterberg now, and we're just about to start that climb. This is a nasty little one, Paul. Stabs at the legs. There you can see it in the distance.
It really is a nasty little climb, and it's one of those tough climbs that it actually starts to get steeper and steeper as you get closer to the summit, so you actually hit this climb with absolutely no momentum at all. These guys are really going to suffer on this climb, as you'll see when we flick back to the main field in a few moments time, just how quickly they are going to charge up this mountain here of the Konokterberg. The 4 leaders, they know right now that the race is happening behind. They know just exactly how the Ronde van Vlaanderen is going to unfold, and they realize that the big attacks are starting to come, and they can only hope that they will survive and manage to get onto the back end of one of these big groups that are certainly going to come over the summit of the Old Quaremont in a few moments time. But at the back here, Phil, you can see Rodriguez is not very happy at all with the steepness of the Konokterberg.
Well, we're looking now at 79 kilometers remaining, and one rider has got himself right off the front here, the most experienced of the group, Erwin Thijs. Decided the 3 others haven't quite got it now. He's at home in his own country as Erwin moves away and leaves the other 3 to their fate. So it looks like the Konokterberg is the graveyard for the breakaway. It'll tumble down pretty rapidly now. They got together at around 32 kilometers, the 4 of them coming together. And since then, they have led this race by almost 20 minutes. The gap is inside 10 now as we climb the Konokterberg, and Erwin Thijs has pushed on alone.
When they get to the summit of this, they actually turn left, and they are, if they could go straight on and take a shortcut, they would be actually at the same point at the summit of the Old Quaremont, but they have to drop down into the town of Kruisberg, go around a small loop at the bottom, and then they will attack the Old Quaremont. And these guys right now, they're going to get picked up pretty rapidly indeed, because you can see the impetus is completely gone for them. Erwin Thijs has decided that he will carry on alone and try to survive as long as possible, but almost certainly now this is announcing the end of the breakaway. It is still a huge time advantage of 9 minutes and 47 seconds, but you can see even Thijs, who's opened up a gap over his former breakaway companions, he hasn't got the power to get up this climb, and he will lose an awful lot of time over the next 10 or 15 kilometers.
And there's the gap inside 10 minutes. So Erwin is determined to grab a little bit more publicity for his Palmans team. It's a small team in Belgium, but gets away with a lot of good victories over a year in his own country. And now he's getting all of the plaudits of the crowd by himself. But the gap inside 10 minutes, there you can see 9:46. And they're not really chasing these riders down. They have a real big infight going on back in that peloton. And it's being spearheaded by US Postal. A lot of strong riders on that team, Paul, are willing to throw the weight behind that team. And remember, at the end of the day, the theory is they're doing it all for George Hincapie. But we've still a long way to go yet.
A very good point that you brought up there, Phil, because it's almost at the moment as if we're looking at two races. These four guys are racing against each other, just trying to stay off the front end of the main field, but the main field are not taking any notice at all of them. They may well occasionally just have a quick check to see what the time gap is, but they know that the pressure of their race here further down the road will almost certainly pull those leaders back into the fold without the necessity of having to organize a strong chase at the front. They will have been very careful when that breakaway formed early on to make sure they knew the composition and made sure that they didn't have a guy like Jackie Durand, who they would have then had a pretty hard time pulling back into the fold.
Roy is where we are, and the gap continues at a pace held here by US Postal, with the rest just queuing up behind and nobody offering to help. They know the tactics as well, of course. They know they're relying on a victory for George Hincapie, but they have that added double barb to the hook today with Armstrong as well. These are the breakaways of Hunter and Karsten Kroon, picked up by the chase, so everybody back together now. Just the four breakaways who themselves have split up are clear. Robbie Hunter taking a good look over his shoulder to feel the pressure from US Postal. Now accelerates. Hunter's not done for, I would think.
No, it's amazing. The punchy style of Robbie Hunter there, Phil, really is quite remarkable. He's a great bike rider, very aggressive, and it was good to see him start the season off so well, because we always regarded him really basically just as a pure sprinter, but to come up with that individual time trial victory proves to me that in a couple of years' time, Robbie Hunter could be the kind of rider who will have the ability to win some of the shorter 4 or 5 day bike races.
Well, next on the menu is the Old Quaremont, coming at 69 kilometers, so it's just 6 kilometers to go now to that climb. A climb we've never seen in the Tour of Flanders for 15 years. And this is going to prove a most interesting ascent. The road is slightly wider than the old climb. The cobblestones were painstakingly replaced one by one for this climb right through the winter. At one stage, Paul, it was touch and go. It would be ready for the race, but it is, and the crowd awaits the arrival now of this year's Tour of Flanders.
Funnily enough, I actually spoke to Lance Armstrong yesterday, and I was talking about the change of the Tour of Flanders route since he raced back in 1995, and he said, well, I haven't been to look at the course. He said, all I'm going to do is just follow George Hincapie around. And he said at the end of the day, the only thing to do is to ride at the front anyway and keep out of trouble.
Well, and that's exactly what they've been doing, because we've seen all the chaos at the back, and the US Postal have used their strength now to control what is, as you can see, a very much depleted peloton now.
The main field will start to get smaller and smaller as we get into the cobble climb section of this bike race here, but it's all really now a question of elimination by the rear. There's Freddie Rodriguez, not getting a lot of help from his teammates right now, but very sensibly riding all of the time close to the front. Armstrong has got his men in fine form right now. Now these are Van Petegem's men. There's a crash at the back here. Oh, somebody's gone down from Crédit Agricole, and that looks as if it was Thor Husvod, the big Swedish rider there.
It is. Now that's a big blow to Crédit Agricole, because he is their young star and likely to replace Stuart O'Grady here at the top of the team pile, because O'Grady himself looking unlikely at the moment to ride in the Tour de France. That's how he did it. And Paul, that was a very painful way to sit down. His saddle has snapped. That's what happened. His saddle bolt snapped, and he lost it completely. That was a nasty shock and a very painful fall.
very lucky to get out of that as well without too much of an injury. A very sensible move too, because you saw him picking up his 2 bottles at the side of the road there, because it's always an important thing to make sure you still remain calm and collected in a situation like that. A lot of riders tend to panic when they have an accident or an incident like that, but that actually doesn't gain you anything at all. You have to try and remain calm, wait for the team mechanic to come up to you. If he comes, then you're back in the bike race. If he doesn't, well, it's all over for the day.
So 73 kilometers to go, and the group is all together again. What's left of them now? Hushov is going to be chasing behind, hopefully, for Grady Agricole. And it looks as though the impetus for the moment, the fire out of the peloton. It won't be for long, because they're all now extremely nervous as they are beginning to approach the climb of the Old Quaremont.
Well, the main field here has still got to hit the Konokterberg, because they are still a couple of kilometers behind the leaders. The one leader now, who is Erwin Thijs, being chased by 3 other riders. There you can see moving forward, the Mappe rider is Andrea Taffy. Freddie Rodriguez is always pretty much to the front. And 1 or 2 more jerseys starting to appear here from Domo Farfrieds. And there is Johan Museo.
Yeah.
You see, he knows the important parts of this race.
Magic.
He knows the tactics, and he knows when he has to be at the front, and boom, all of a sudden there he is.
So 8 minutes after the leaders split up on this climb, here comes the peloton, the Konokterberg for them. Again, a reasonably new climb to the Tour of Flanders. Only first climbed in 1997, climbing it now for the 6th time.
Matty White on the front there. He's a tough bike rider, Matty White. Doesn't win very many bike races, but he certainly is a super asset for the US Postal Service. He was very upset last year that he didn't make the selection for the Tour de France, but I tell you one thing, he always comes out and he's always consistent throughout the season. They can count on this man. This Aussie is a tough bike rider and very much at home on roads like this. But right now, you get an idea of what professional bike racing teams are all about. Matt White today is riding for George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong. It doesn't matter whether he finishes this bike race or not. The important thing is to make sure that his men get into the strategic points in a position without having had any difficulties.
That's all he has to do, and it'll be a professional job well done. So here's Matty White on the front now, and sets the pace nice. It looks like Servais Knaven there in second wheel, just for the moment at least, doing his job for Domo. This is life at the back of the peloton here, and still riding well is just about, well, you can see the hole in his shorts, but Thor Hushovd has arrived at the back. But as I say, a very painful sit down on the road that was. But he's got his bike and he shows his sheer class, and he's got himself back into the back of this group.
On the right hand side there in the white jersey, Michele Bartley. A little bit of a problem with the neck. I know how that feels, because I've sat on plenty of planes so far this year. But for Husvod, a very difficult crash. Unfortunately, now he's back up and on a spare machine. Psychologically, that's not a whole lot of fun in a bike race like this, and that's why he's just sitting at the back at the moment. He'll hope to recover over the next kilometre or so. He knows that this race is not going to decide the Tour of Flanders, but what he will try and do is, once they get over the summit of the Konokterberg, on the big wide road down into Kruisbergen, he will try and move up the outside and get himself into a good position for the next big climb, the one that I always feel is a very important strategic climb, the Old Quaremont. There is Armstrong, looking very comfortable there, moving up into second position there. Hincapie's there in third. Servais Knaven, as you said, Phil, is also very close to the front right now.
Pirate Bay winner last year, and that's Buxhofer in the Phonak, who he's dropped back a bit now. He's gone back 3 men. Armstrong concentrating here on the back wheel of his teammate. He'll be very impressed, I think, with Matty White's hard work today. But they are riding a very, very clever race at the moment. They've got the strength to do just that, it seems. Let's hope they're not selling it out too soon, because although it's only 71 kilometres to go, these are a vicious 71 kilometres. And we must not forget the wind will be on their noses as they come through the final climbs. But Matt White is giving 110% right now to keep this race under control. Hincapie has come right up behind his team captain, although reversal roles there, I think, because Armstrong says he's going to make it for George today, and this could have a fairy tale result for the US Postal Riders. A little bit early to say that, I think, as they come towards the top of the Konokterberg. And well done to the Australian, because he's ridden a superb climb, Matt White, and kept control of the head of this race.
It hurts. You can see by his face he's really hurting right now, but he doesn't care because he knows he doesn't have to finish the Tour of Flanders. He knows that the general and the second in command, George Hincapie, are there on his wheel. A little bit further back, this is the former winner of the bike race, Jackie Durand. He's going to try and use his experience here, but I think his experience is not going to be that much of a help once he gets over the summit of this climb, as we now go straight over to the Kemmelberg. We are now back with Erwin Thijs, the old Quaremont, I should say.
I thought we'd shot forward a few miles there, Paul. Yes, this is the old Quaremont. We're coming in part way through here, but there's the cobblestones, as we're seeing now. The climb here by Erwin Thijs, and the big crowd on the roadside, and 8 minutes 22. Now, well, they've stopped showing the group in between, but they're falling away, and they'll be picked up much quicker, I think, than this rider. He might survive a while yet, because now he's on his own. He seems content to set the pace as he trundles that gear up towards the summit of this climb. There's still the Koppenberg to come, remember, the one that they've rebuilt. And as they head up towards the top of this climb, it's a climb which Paul and I ride on occasion every time we come to Belgium at this time of the year. But you can't see it, but just round to the right there's a little coffee shop, and that's where you find us about now. But for Matt White, I'm afraid he's still 70 kilometres from his coffee.
Well, it's a tough climb. In fact, the first part of the climb is reasonably steep, but I always find the hardest part of this climb is actually when you ride out of the town here of Quaremont and you go onto this false flat. It really is then when the main field literally explodes through the pressure of the big boys on the front end. And there's a huge crowd out here on the old Quaremont this afternoon. And Erwin Thijs,
one of the biggest, in fact.
It's a massive crowd, and I think it's a lot to do with the fact that it's absolutely superb, the weather here in Belgium today. It really is abnormal for this time of year. But the one thing that is still there and always seems to be present in Belgium is the wind. Look at that flag. Once he gets to the top here, we're now starting to head towards the east mainly, and that's towards the finish line in Merbeke. And nearly all of the time from now on to the finish, these riders will have either a headwind or a cross headwind.
Yes, at the moment it's cross coming from the right of our screen as we look. But you know, this is a marvellous couple of hours for Erwin Thijs now to lead the Tour of Flanders when you are a Belgian in what are his twilight years as a professional cyclist. 31 years of age, and the crowd here in Belgium appreciate one of their own setting the pace. 61 victories for Belgium cyclists out of a possible 86. It's a marvellous record. And now this man is about to find smoother road, and which he'll certainly enjoy. But he's ridden the Koppenberg well today, the old Quaremont rather well. But if we've seen a crowd like we've just seen on the old Quaremont, I'm just wondering what we can expect to be greeted with on the new climb of the Koppenberg.
I think it's going to be absolute and utter chaos. It always was, and I think a lot of people will go back there because this is a fairly historic Ronde van Vlaanderen, bringing back the Koppenberg into this race. He's almost at the summit here, and he will come up onto a road called the Ronde van Vlaanderen Straat. And in fact, as he turns left there, he's going to take in a little bit of extra cobblestones that the race has managed to find over the last couple of years. This now is the main field. A little bit further back, they're on the descent now down off the summit of the Konokterberg, and very shortly they will take a right-hand turn in Kruisbergen at the top. They'll ride alongside the Schelde for a short while, then they will turn up, and they too will then be on the same cobblestones as we were looking at Erwin Thijs on a few moments ago.
A bit difficult to count them right now, but I would say about 40-45 men left in the Tour of Flanders as we head now into the last 70 kilometres of the race. The gap comes inside, 8 minutes to the leader. Now we're flashing back here. Now what are they going to show us? Another delay by a crash, I suspect. Remember, these are live pictures, so we're as surprised as you are when they hit us, but no, just a slowing of the peloton, and they're all regrouped. I think there might have been somebody fell in the middle there, but we never got to see them. They've got a headwind just now, as we saw by those flags.
A little bit of respite for the moment. These guys know these roads to absolute perfection, especially the Belgian riders. They're always moving up. They always know exactly when they want to be on the front. It's 1.1 kilometers now to the start of the old Quaremont. It's a very difficult climb, and the road is so narrow. It's only wide enough for about 5 or 6 bike riders. Yeah. And if you're not in the first 10 or 15, the race nearly always splits there, and a lot of groups of 15, 20 riders start to separate and form on the big dual carriageway on the top.
Well, I reckon that this is going to see the start of something on this climb, because it is a very tough climb. It is hard to get your wheels to bite in as you make the ascent, and if you don't get a good clean run at it, and you slip a gear, then you block the whole peloton, and that's it. And so this is going to be the most interesting climb, and the riders who are strong have got to go on to this climb, I think, for what, the first 10?
It's best to go in at least in the first 10, because it's almost impossible to pass anybody on this climb, and you need to be there really, because when they do accelerate over the summit, it is a tough climb indeed. Up again near the front of the main field, you get a chance there to see Erik Zabel, and again we're looking at a very strategic point of the Tour of Flanders, which is why again it's almost like a race finish. We've got Team Telecom leading it out as if they were leading out Erik Zabel at the finish of a stage of the Tour de France, because these guys know now as they get onto this very narrow street that now the Tour of Flanders is starting in earnest.
And look how the Telecom team, the other tactic is to come to the front and fan across the road and block anybody making the move. Fred Rodriguez is tucked nicely in off to the left of our picture. Dirksens is up here, Lance on, George Hincapie is tucked in with those white glasses on. And little Paolo Bettini is the man in the centre with the white crash helmet. And that's just what they've done, Paul. They've actually fanned out and blocked the road.
On the right-hand side there is also Mario Cipollini. So Cipollini looking for something today. He wants to keep that leader's jersey in the World Cup competition for as long as possible. But Team Telecom did the perfect move there. They got Erik Zabel into the first 4 or 5 places. And I wonder where Lance Armstrong is. I saw, like you did, George Hincapie there. I would think Armstrong won't be too far away from him. And you can see it's amazing how the race is absolutely split to pieces. A lot of riders have disappeared from the rear end of the main field right now. Rated with 4 stars, the old Quaremont. The average gradient there, Phil, is only 4.2%, but the climb itself is a very long climb and it carries on over the summit. The first part, I would say, is closer to 10%, but the long gradual false flat over the top is where most of the damage is done.
First come in 1974 and has been climbed every year since, this mountain. We'll call them mountains, I think, down this end of the world, because there isn't anything better or higher. But you see the second tactic being deployed now. Block the road and stop anybody getting past you. The race was all to get to the front for that bend at the bottom, which the Telecom won. And now they've got complete control. And Mario Cipollini, you know, this man isn't just a sprinter. He's a very clever bike rider. He's always in the place when he's got ambition. And I think he is very much inspired this particular season. I was actually with him in South Africa and saw him training through the month of December, and you could tell by the way he was applying himself, he had great ambitions this year.
Now the man that we very rarely see until the most important times of this race has moved into the second line there, Johan Museo. That's Schiandri on the front there as well for the Lamprey squad. So Schiandri again, like last year, looking to get himself in the right place at the right tactical time here. Now then, Zabel is in second place. Weseman is up there as well. Amazing to see that Mario Cipollini on the old Quaremont is at the moment in 4th position. But let's just see how Johan Museo reacts to this climb.
Yes, and nice. Weseman is the rider dodging around on the right here now, as he's seen the way up the climb. They make it look so easy on television. Believe me, this is a nasty little climb, and it, at this particular point, is quite steep. But they've got a really good tempo going. Doesn't look so easy from the back, from the helicopter, does it? As the leaders now are setting the pace. And Telecom in control as they get into the steepest part of this 11% climb. 8:11, Musubi inside 8 minutes to the one leader, really. Remember, there are still 3 in between, but we've lost sight of them for the moment. But they're probably only 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes ahead now.
Well, that group is starting to split up somewhat. What a great ride being done by Telecom today, and what a turn up for the books for Erik Zabel if he would be able to stay at the front end of this bike race. I think, though, Team Telecom's tactics on the Quaremont here are really to look after Stefan Weseman, who over the last couple of years, Phil, really has matured into a one-day classics rider, and especially a specialist for the Tour of Flanders and as well for Paris-Roubaix in a week's time. This is Andreas Clear on the front, and you can see these two guys have opened up a pretty serious gap. There's the coffee shop that you were talking about there. This is the flatter part of the course now, and I tell you one thing, it really is difficult as we get a glimpse there of Erwin Thijs. He is now actually on the slopes of the Paterberg.
Yes, and he is approximately 4 kilometers ahead on the road now of these two riders. And that is what separates the complete field, really, in the Tour of Flanders, because riders who are left behind at this stage know all the back roads back to the showers. At least they get the hot water when they get through to Meerbeker. The two Telecom boys are taking advantage of that strong show by the US Postal Service and now putting in their tactic, which is to try and get Stefan Westermann up to the front, which they've done. But I don't see Zabel in this group at the minute.
Not for the moment. He disappeared pretty quickly there. In second position in the second group coming across there is Georgi Hincapie. He knows how to pay attention. There's Stefano Zanini coming across right now, and Freddie Rodriguez. There is Johan Museo. Now look at this. This is
He's
power.
an amazing guy.
He's a brilliant bike rider, one of the best classic bike riders of the last 10 or 15 years. He knows exactly where he has to be, but you notice he only used enough energy to be in the right place at the right time. He is waiting till later on in this bike race. And when you think, Phil, of all of the difficulties he's been through over the last few years of his career, with that terrible crash in Paris-Roubaix and then the motorbike accident, it's amazing that this guy keeps coming back to the top level of the sport.
And he's on form. Let's not forget he's had third in the recent Grand Prix Harelbeke, or the Grand Prix E3, which is named after the local highway here. Also had a stage win in the Gilden Sport 2-day race in Holland. So he's got good form and coming back from all of his ailing problems, and is looking for a 4th record victory in the Tour of Flanders. He's watching everything right now. Museo will not make a move until he gets to the hill he loves most, which is the Mur de Grammont. That's where he'll go. If he's in a group, he'll try it there and see what comes of the move, and then try and consolidate over the final climb of the day, the Bosberg. And once you're at the top of that, you are just 7 miles from the finish, and there's trouble on the climb. Riders locking up now. That's what happens if you slip a gear or get interfered with. You simply don't make the top.
I'm not sure whereabouts in the field that was, because that was a certain amount of chaos. It must have been at the rear end of the main field that incident happened there. But at the front end of the main field is where this race really is important, on the Old Quaremont. In about 50 meters time, they will turn onto the huge highway which links Ronde with Kruisbergen, and that is where for a few moments these guys have got a chance to bring themselves back into the race.
And now there's the incident again, and what happened there, and the rider in trouble was Wilfried Kretskins. If you get off this road, Paul, and into the grass, sometimes the lip of the cobbles means you can't get back onto the road.
Very dangerous indeed, and as long as you've got a bit of momentum, you can actually jump back onto the cobblestones, but it's a very dangerous thing to do. Not so bad today because the road is dry, but you try a maneuver like that in the wet and you're very quickly on your backside. Now this is what the Old Quaremont is all about. It's separated the men from the boys. The cream has come to the top right now, and you can see 1 or 2 of the big names moving forward. They will sit back for just a kilometre or so to see who is there, make sure that none of the big guys are actually missing, and I would say there are around about 25 guys in that group right now, and they are the most important men. So far, Johan Museo has made the junction. Look at him there in 3rd position. Andrea Taffy has made it as well. You see the big names know how important the Old Quaremont is. Zanini's there in 2nd.
This is a very good move. It had to come on that narrow climb. Now the strong men are free to apply the will on the Tour of Flanders. The gap is very manageable at 7:34. They will know that the breakaway has split at the front, only one man out front now. They know his reputation, they know his ability, they know they'll wipe him out in the last few climbs of the day. But now they're free to operate new tactics once they assess just who has made the split. But be careful, because you know that there is a bunch behind, and not very far behind. If our helicopter swung right, we'd probably see it about 200 meters. Quite a large peloton trying to rejoin these 25 leaders. And that's what I counted too, 25 men up front. And we've seen Johan Museo with George Hincapie is certainly here. We know that Stefan Westermann is here. Hopefully Lance Armstrong is here too. He should be. He was in the right position when the split went. Oh, we can get a little glimpse now. One lone motorcyclist coming around that corner. There they are. Now that is the second chase, which might get across.
They don't have much chance to do it because we're actually dropping down here, and in about 1 kilometre's time we're going to hit the Paterberg, and immediately the road kicks back up once again. And these guys, you can be absolutely certain, will hammer up the Paterberg because they realize they have an advantage right now. They have split off around about 30 riders into the second group of what was the main peloton just a few moments ago, and they will try and keep hold of that advantage because they would like to go to the Koppenberg in a situation like this where there is no confusion of dropped riders coming up and riding to the front, because this is fine for them right now. They know who they've got in the group. They know that the race is about to start in earnest. They know that this is the moment when the big decisions are going to happen.
There's only 3 kilometers in fact from the top of the climb that they've just come over, the Old Quaremont, to the start of the Paterberg climb, so that's less than 2 miles. So if they can consolidate a little gap, then surely on the climb they'll begin to pull away. 7:24 now and 63 kilometers, just on 40 miles left to race. The way they're going today, that's about an hour and a half still to ride to the end of the 86 Tour of Flanders. And Erwin Theis has had all day out there to sell himself, but very soon there's going to be a bunch of very top-class bike riders coming up to him. And it's good to see that Fred Rodriguez, inspired by his absolutely brilliant second place in Milan-San Remo, is inspired by his riding down there today as well.
Caught a quick glimpse, in fact, on the old Quaremont of Michele Bartoli. Looking down the line, I can't see him just now, as we get an indication that the 4-starred Paterberg at 20% is the next climb of the day, and Freddie Rodriguez is the first man onto it.
Oh, dear old Fred, and it's 1 in 5 this climb in old money. As he now starts to hurt them, he really is riding well. He's found his legs this year, his second year as American champion. The field are marking him, but then the field is now only 24 strong behind him there. The win of the Tour of Flanders, I suspect, might come from that. There's the turn of what is, we'll call now, the main peloton. The men who got balked or missed out in the split on the climb. There's Fred, and there's Peter van Petegem to the left of our picture on his shoulder now. Michele Bartoli is in here. I think Zabel is up here. Bettini certainly is. Looking back for US Postal. Don't let us down now, boys. Can't see them at the moment, but we know they're in there.
Well, I got a glimpse of Georgie Hincapie just a few moments ago. Freddie Rodriguez today doing a great job for Johan Museo, and this is a picture, Phil, of why you have to try and stay at the front on the old Quaremont, because the next climbs are so narrow that you actually can almost only ride in single file. There is Van Petegem suffering a little bit there. Michele Bartoli just in front of him. Paolo Bettini is the next man coming forward. This is turning out to be a brilliant Ronde van Vlaanderen, but I don't think we've ever seen a bad one anyway.
No.
This is one of the best bike races in the world, and Armstrong says he reckons this bike race is even tougher than Paris-Roubaix.
In many, many ways it is. There are always huge crowds because Belgium is the hotbed of world cycling. The people here are nuts on the sport. Now look at this problem on the climbs, and the rider from Benesto who is in a bit of trouble there is Xavier Zandio. As a Team Koos rider bites the dust and doesn't look too happy with that, and that in fact is Beckham Christensen. Oh, it's chaos out there. That's why you've got to be strong and stay at the front and keep out of the aggravation.
That's why those guys in that small group of 25 riders off the front there wanted to insist, because they know what kind of chaos happens at the back. There's a US Postal rider at the back of the group there, and that in fact is Pavel Padrinos. But these guys have got to try and get themselves over this climb, because in just a few more kilometers time they're going to do exactly the same thing again on the Koppenberg. But right now we've got that 25-man strong group going over the front of this climb together.
Make no mistake, this is why the crowd came, because they get a chance to touch their heroes and give them a leg up. Jean-Patrick Nazon, the sprinter on La Française des Jeux, was walking there as well. Meanwhile, back at the front, it's over the top and on with the Tour of Flanders. The gap is 7 minutes, and very soon we'll be lining up for the Koppenberg. And that is the next climb on the menu. Erwin Theis can't be too far away. It's 61 kilometers to go, because the Koppenberg for him is just 3 kilometers in front of him, and that's the top of the climb. So he's about 2.5 kilometers from it now.
Well, the Tour of Flanders hasn't been here, Phil, since 1987. It's going to be amazing to see this. I raced the Koppenberg a few times in my career, and I never actually was able to get up it on a bicycle in the race.
Oh, you do let me down sometimes, Paul. I thought
well, I can only tell you the truth.
You never actually walked up it. Now you're telling me you never actually rode up it. It is a horrible climb. At least the old version was. We don't know how the new version is going to react yet to the arrival of the Tour of Flanders, nor how many people we can expect to see on the climb. I know that the police were closing one of the national highways for parking of cars to allow people to walk to the climb. They certainly weren't going to risk any cars going to it. There's your man of the Tour of Flanders, 3-time winner Johan Museo, now announcing the fact he's at the front. Daniele Nardello, champion of Italy, tucked in just behind him. Another man who's a remarkable classics rider as well as an outstanding stage race rider. This looks as though we've got Andrea Taffi setting the pace now. Another great bike rider coming to the end of his career, but never short of firepower in those big legs. They always look a bit bent the way he rides the bike, but he's such a strong man.
I tell you, look at that pedaling action right now, and he's producing an awful lot of power out of those legs. Coming across there, one of the riders from Domo, and in fact not too far away right now from the Koppenberg. As we come to the 7th climb of the day, 5 stars, 22% gradient. And this man is really going to suffer. And I wonder if he's going to make it on the bike.
Well, Paul, he's going to be a star, isn't he? Because here is Erwin Thijs bringing the Tour of Flanders back to the Koppenberg with a lead of nearly 7 minutes when he was one stage 20 ahead. But he gets to see the climb first. He'll get the glory, and he'll be remembered for taking the race onto it.
I don't think he's thinking about
No,
any glory
not.
right now. You can look at the pain. He's having a hard time just keeping those legs ticking over right now, because he's been at the front of the bike race, Phil, for around about 200 kilometers. And the thing now is it really is starting to kick into those thighs of his. He's going to have to just try and get it into the lowest gear possible. And the problem with these steep climbs, these 22, 25% grades, is you can't get out of the saddle, because if he gets out of the saddle, he's going to lose all of his traction.
Yes. And it was about here where Alan Piper fell off in his long breakaway and the commissaire ran over him, which made Alan Piper twice as famous as he was before that. But right now we are looking here at a man whose legs are aching. As Paul has said, almost 200 kilometres in the lead, and he's got to face this, and then he's still got to go over the top to the finish with the best part of 60k to go. But this is the new climb. The crowd have been fanned out onto the side. It is a nice crowd. They can't get many more at the summit there. Just look ahead of the rider. And it looks as though they made a lovely job of the road. But the cobblestones are probably too smooth for the purists now.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, they've done a magic job there putting this road back into the Tour of Flanders, and I would have to say that Erwin Thijs will put that down in his picture book, and I'm sure there's plenty of people got photographs of him being the first bike rider to come back to the Koppenberg after all of those years.
Sorry, Paul, that reminds me, it wasn't Alan Piper, it was Jesper Skibby, wasn't it, the Great Dane. He likes me when I call him the Great Dane, who was knocked off his bike well, he fell off the bike. The commissaire ran over the wheels of his bike after that. Here we are back with the Mappe boys now. Bettini, Zanini setting the pace. These are the riders now continuing a private battle. It looks like they've got a little split going here.
This is a pretty serious part of the race here.
They
We've
must
got
have slipped away on
Zanini in
the
this group.
Peterberg.
Zanini there, and looking a bit further back down to see if Peter van Petegem has made this split. This race really is starting to be rather interesting here. There is Taffy, Bettini. Now this is rather a good move here by Mappe, Phil. They've got 3 riders in this split off the front.
They have.
And it looks very much as if Johan Museeuw has been caught out. Michele Bartoli, the cat, just on the back there.
Also, I noted there Enrico Cassani was the Domo rider who got into the break. He was working very hard. Another Italian who rides on the Belgian setup. But this must have happened off camera on the climb of the Peterberg last time, the previous climb. And obviously they're going to look forward to an approach up the Koppenberg. Serge Baguet sitting at the back, another man who could spring a big surprise today. He had a very good Amstel Gold, it was last year, on his comeback year, having retired, said that's it, and then decided he loved cycling so much he came back, and he came back in a big way.
Well, after all of that hard work by US Postal, they seem to have missed out right now. This is one of the survivors of that leading group of 4 riders. This is the Vlaanderen rider, Jan Koos. He is around about 2.5 minutes behind the lone leader and approximately 3 minutes in front of the front part of that split containing the big stars of Mappe. Interesting to see Mappe adopting their usual tactic there. 3 men in that front splint, and it seems as if Johan Museeuw, George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong have missed out for the moment.
Well, let's hope they can repair this damage, because this is a serious stage of the race. To lose ground to some of the riders in this breakaway. And not all of the best men are here yet, but the big worry is Museeuw.
He's there. I just spotted him.
He's right
He's
there.
amazing. I didn't
look
see
at
him.
the gap though. The reaction's coming. George is coming across.
I didn't see him the first time there. It looked as if he'd missed out. There is Hincapie. Nardello now chasing. Robbie Hunter, the South African rider, he's still in there as well.
And I think there are only 2 US Postal riders left now in the hunt. Hunter is trying to get across the gap, and so too Fred Rodriguez. The reaction is serious enough. Hincapie there is best of them. I'm not sure that the other rider is Armstrong, but we'll get a glimpse. He's riding at the back of this second group, which is coming up, as they've just caught the poor old Kelme rider Rodriguez. There he comes, swept back and out of it after his long day in the saddle. But look how much time he lost to the leader, 6.5 minutes. and they've picked him up.
Well, once you get to this part of the course, it really is easy to lose half a minute to a minute on every one of these cobble climbs, and that's what's happening to what remains of that four-man leading group in this bike race. There was an attack came off the front there, and I thought by the style it looked very much like Andrea Taffy. But you know, I think that is Johan Museo as well, who's leapt across there.
It looks like Museo who's leading to me.
It really is remarkable, this guy. I didn't see him in the first time we went through that group, and I thought he'd missed out. Then all of a sudden we went back to check, and there he was.
Yes, you can always tell Museo because he tends to do a lot of head switching and looking around. Once he's got a move on, he wants everybody to either contribute or get out of it. And that's what he's doing right now. But this is an interesting move. He's put a lot of pressure on the other riders now to come out and get him. Whoever that rider is, Mappe, is tailing off the back at the moment. We think it's little Paolo Bettini as we head on to the Koppenberg for what is the peloton kind of right now. And there's the gap as they start the Koppenberg, 6:23.
Well, it's come down dramatically from when we first came on the air, and that was 20 minutes the advantage those four riders had. And now we're onto the Koppenberg for the main field. The big stars are all in this group right now. It's only 600 meters, but they've made an absolutely superb job here. There's Hincapie just getting across there with Daniele Nardello, and that will now make another Mappe rider in this small group of select riders now. Mappe, 4 riders present as Paolo Bettini comes to the front.
But how this race has changed in the last 15-20 kilometers from the US Postal driving the race on. We've now only got their favourite, Hincapie, trying to fight his way back into the frame here as Paolo Bettini is the first to see the climb. He starts to give it his best shot as well. There's a little group trying to get back on. That'll give us one more US Postal rider in the breakaway, which makes 2. And I think that will be it for them now. As they start the climb here, Bettini, like riders before him, these men have to do their best to sit in the saddle and hold that bike on the cobbles. If you get out of the saddle, the chances are you'll pick it up off the floor and fall backwards. This is a steep little climb here. Van Petegem, there he is coming through screen now, still very much a favourite. Here comes your man George Hincapie. Daniele Nardello is through as well. Fred Rodriguez is also tagged on, having a great day out today, and it is Lance Armstrong, the only other man left now from US Postal.
Well, that's why he came to the Ronde van Vlaanderen. There's Mario Cipollini as well. Cippo is still in it.
He's
Cipollini
amazing.
Is still there. That is absolutely remarkable.
Well, they're going to worry about him if he keeps this up. If he gets over the top of this, because it's such a steep climb, he's a big man, Cipollini, and in a little bit of trouble at the back. Stefan Westerman looks as though he might be losing ground.
That's a surprise to see him here. There's the remainder of the main field in the Tour of Flanders. There's still the possibility that these riders can survive. There are a couple of riders in here for the US Postal Service that in fact looks like the young rider Tom Bonen, the Belgian rider. He will be super motivated today. 21 years of age, his first attempt here at the big Tour of Flanders. He's ridden the amateur version, but he will be just trying to keep himself in contact, thinking about how the requirements will be for George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong in the latter part of this race.
Interestingly enough, I think that was Dierksens who was heading up the climb from this chase, so he's missed on the split as well. A lot of the teammates of Cipollini, if they could get back, would help him, but at the moment they're in trouble. This is a select bunch, but losing ground to the breakaway.
Rolf Aldag in there, the Telecom rider, just going through in the pink jersey. But certainly this race has really exploded. Really, Phil, in only just 10 kilometers of racing. That's why it is so important to ride near the front on the old Quaremont, because that's where the race literally explodes for the first time in the afternoon.
That's where it all happened, on the narrow climb of the old Quaremont, where we saw Telecom position themselves very well. And we're looking now to see Gianluca Bortolami, last year's winner. We just got a tail end shot of him in that second group. And he's now may have to play second fiddle to other Italian riders who have made the selection. Looking down, this is the turn of the chase group onto the Koppenberg. Because of the narrow slopes, I see we've noted our motorbikes. Somebody went down there, overshot the bend.
I think it might have been Stefan Westerman. It looked like a pink jersey, but it was difficult to see from that altitude. The race now breaking apart and coming back together again here all of the time. That attack there looks very similar to the style of Andrea Taffy. Well, if it's not the style, it certainly is the kind of tactic that Taffy adopts. He just keeps throwing hand grenades into the main field now and just trying to get himself off the front. What he tries to do is fatigue the other riders. He attacks so many times and just hopes eventually they'll look the other way and say, well, let him go off the front for a bit.
Well, Mappe are well represented up here just now, and they could be the big danger team, but one or two favourites have lived up to their ranking. Peter van Petegem, Johan Museu, they are in the lead group, and George Hincapie as well. But funnily enough, in the weekend papers, all the journalists, probably recognising the name Armstrong more than Hincapie, was naming Armstrong as the favourite over Hincapie, when we knew all the time that Armstrong has always said he's in this race to ride for George Hincapie, but we'll see. Steenbeck-Dries is the climb we're on now, and this climb is coming at 52 kilometres from the finish once we're over the top of it.
Well, the man we're looking at right now, Erwin Thijs, really much more known as a kermis rider, the small races that abound around Belgium. He won 3 small kermesses last year.
Well, this is the first time the race has been over this climb. 700 metres long, and it looks as though Erwin Thijs is grabbing every second of publicity. This has been a fabulous show of defiance by him, and giving his Palmans team in the country where it matters, his home country of Belgium, plenty of exposure.
Well, that's the important thing for some of these smaller Belgian teams, to get their name on TV as much as possible. You can see by his style here that he really is not enjoying these cobble climbs at all. But the race behind has really begun for the big names in this year's Tour of Flanders. It was good to see that Armstrong had made it there to that junction, but I think he was having a bit of a hard time right now. He told me he didn't think that he had the same kind of condition as he had in the Amstel Gold Race a couple of years ago when he finished second, and last year when he also popped up with second place as well. But with Armstrong, it's always very difficult to tell. It's really a question of super motivation, and I think he will dig very deeply today into his resources to try and stay as close to George Hincapie as possible, because Hincapie is doing everything right.
He is, and he's obviously inspired, but he's giving himself a very tough ride. He's tried his best to keep this race under control, but I think they've lost the control of it just now. But as long as Hincapie can profit from the manoeuvres of the other teams, everybody's losing teammates now, of course. It's down to the leaders now to show what they can do in Flanders. But look at the route still to go, Paul, with the climbs like the Tyenberg, Eichenberg, Leberg, Berendries, and then, of course, the Muur itself and the Bosberg. It is a fearsome end to this race.
It really is. It's changed a lot over the last couple of years, and I think they've made it much more exciting by keeping all of the climbs so close together. But it also is very difficult for anybody to control the race by putting all of the climbs in such a successive nature, because you have to be alert all of the time. Any time over the next 53 kilometers the winning break could form. That's why you have to be absolutely alert for the next hour and a quarter.
Now, still the lone figure, blazing a trail across Flanders, and he's Belgian, Erwin Thijs, at 31 years of age. Little bit of respite, even if it is over cobblestones. Well, at this moment, when you're happy the roads are dry, this would have been a very dicey left-hander over the railroad. If it had been raining today, at least they put some tarmac down there. But his old legs now, as he keeps this big gear churned out. Back to the chase. It looks like we've got 5 men here, and tagged on the back, it looks like Lance Armstrong.
I think it is Armstrong. Looking at that position there, he's riding a defensive position here for George Hincapie, and he's found himself on the attack right now. But he's keeping true to his word right now, Phil. He is sitting on the back, but there's always a big possibility that if the race develops, Armstrong could end up being the leader of the team.
From the helicopter there, Paul, I could see he was actually on his radio. He sort of was saying probably to George, come on up here, mate, it's fewer riders.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get a chance to go down there in a few moments' time. The lone leader very shortly will be on the slopes of the Tyenberg, which itself is a very difficult climb, almost as steep as the Paterberg and the Koppenberg, and that will be the climb where we will once again see this group starting to split up. It looks now as if there's an awful lot of tactical manoeuvring going on between the big leaders. The team who need to take responsibility right now are Team Mappe, who I reckon on a quick calculation have still got 5 riders in this group, but it looks as if it's going to be Fassa Bortolo who take over control, but it's not.
19 riders, looks like Bortolami. 19 riders here in this little group at the moment as they make their way. It's Balducci, I think, who's heading the field here for Tacconi Sport. 19 riders. Then we've got Lance Armstrong in that little interesting split as we approach the Steenbeek-Dries climb, and the gap continues to come down, heading up to the 5-minute advantage now for Erwin Thijs. He should still be clear for the next couple of little hills first. There's the group containing Armstrong, and there's Armstrong sitting at the back of the group here, and it looks as, I think in fact it's Hincapie, isn't it? It is Hincapie this, so he's got the right man across to the back. So, and content to sit there at the moment as they assess the breakaway. Now, this little rider here, who we have breakfast with this morning, Gabriella Misalia, is looking very sharp.
I think Kevin's got a bit of a problem there. He keeps looking down. I think it may well be that his gears are jumping slightly, and this is a bit of an unfortunate moment for him to be there, because the car behind is a neutral server. There you see the hand has gone up. He hasn't got his team car behind him, and I'm not sure what the problem is. He's pointing down there, and it sounds as if something's rattling quite badly.
Well, let's hope
it's a rear wheel puncture, I think.
But he won't get away with that. He might be able to hang on with the mechanical, but with a flat tire, he's had it on this climb. We've got Erwin Thijs here now, further on as he starts this tough climb at the Tyenberg. This is the one that many of the Tourist Routier riders yesterday, and remember there were 15,000 of them, found this, they reckon, the hardest climb of the whole day. Well, for Erwin Thijs, he might be echoing those thoughts right now, but then he has been in the lead for 200 kilometers.
I'm Christian Vanderveld, and you're watching World Cycling Productions.
18%, a huge crowd turning out here as well. It's a magnificent day here, Phil. I can't remember ever having seen the Tour of Flanders held on such a magnificent spring day, and that's what has made the crowds come out in their hundreds of thousands to see this bike race. And still, Hincapie, he actually wants his own team car to come forward, so it may well be a problem with the gears that need to be adjusted.
Well, at least he's hanging on in there when it matters, and let's hope that he can hang on till help comes from the rear, because he's done the right thing. He's latched on to what is a very good chase group here. There is Kasani, Taffy and Sorensen are the other riders in this breakaway.
Well, good to see Rolf Sorensen, a former winner of this bike race, getting himself into this move. This is the select group behind who are forming up now, and we'll get a chance to see just who's decided to take responsibility. There is Mario Cipollini on the right-hand side in the white jersey, leader of the World Cup. Peter van Petegem is in this group, as is Johan Museo as well.
Well, good luck to a big tall man on these climbs like Cipollini, inspired by his white leader's jersey. First time he's held that after Milan-San Remo in his career. Been twice second in that event, and remember, he's got a career now in his 15th year. Now here's George, clearly got his problems, and he's getting a little bit agitated now, shaking his head. He needs some help, and I don't know how much longer he can hang on here.
The big problem is they're in a breakaway situation right now. They don't have more than 30 seconds over the group that's behind them, so they won't let his team car come forward.
No.
He seems to be waiting and insisting that it's his team car comes forward to look after him. But even so, with those two riders, Sorensen getting dropped up the back there as well, there's no way that the US Postal Service car can get in there to help him out, and they've got a pretty good advantage over that group right now.
Well, this is a crucial move right now, and it's more than 30 seconds. I would have thought they, probably because of the nature of the course, they can't get the car past the riders, but there is a neutral service in position. I don't know what George's problem is, that he can't go there to speak to the guy who's driving neutral service right now, but it'll no doubt sort itself out as we continue up with the lead. This is Mark Wouters, just in a little bit of bother, number 21. There's Cipollini, and as we fan out now and find Bettini there, Fred Rodriguez. And still riding at the front now, we've got US Postal. But up to the men now from the leaderboard. And these are the Telecom boys. Andreas Clear, we saw him in action earlier, now doing a great job in defence. And the other Telecom rider here is Eric himself, Eric Zabel.
Armstrong is in there as well. Freddie Rodriguez today will be working for Johan Museo. There's Paolo Bettini and Zanini. Robbie Hunter still doing a great ride. Peter van Petegem also riding sensibly from a tactical point of view. He's making sure he stays in this group. He hasn't made an awful lot of efforts since he made that big effort on the Molenberg a long time ago right now. He's kept himself to the front, and it seems as if quite a few riders have actually come up from the rear, and this group is now starting to swell in numbers.
Well, Tom Boonen's got back for US Postal. He's had a wonderful day's racing for the team, the young Belgian rider. As we look down, and there has been a pretty much of a regrouping behind the 5 breakaways. Many of these, of course, may not know that the 5 riders have got clear because they've just tagged on from the rear. There's the official gaps. They've got a minute now, Paul, more or less, over the group containing Armstrong. We'll call one the Hincapie group and the Mainfield the Armstrong group. That's a minute advantage. But obviously on roads like this and the way the line out is taking place, they're not going to get a service car through to look after George.
Not for a very long time. Not, in fact, I don't think until they get to the top of the Eichenberg. Once they get to the summit of the Eichenberg, they go out onto a large main road for quite some time, and that might be a chance, if that time gap does slot up to around about 1 minute, to let the team manager go by. The team manager in this day and age of communications will know just exactly what is happening to Georgi Hincapie right now, and he'll be stuck in the team car just trying to force his way forward, trying to make the referees allow him to come forward to look after Hincapie. I can only think that he must have a problem with either his gearing or with the bottom of the frame that might have some kind of a crack, but because it is making quite a bit of noise.
Well, don't say that, because on this climb it's cobbled all the way. Tyenberg, George will be in serious trouble if he's got a broken frame, and I hope he hasn't. But if he's got even a gear problem, he's going to have huge problems now controlling. He clearly does have a problem, because he's not setting the pace. He is more or less just trying to hang on to the back, and it's not because of lack of strength here, I feel. Andrea Taffy, if he senses anything wrong with Hincapie, will attack him for sure. Misalia is the rider doing the pacemaking for Lamprey, and sitting here at the back, for the moment at least, is Rolf Sorensen, who is such a good guy and felt he made a real mess of the finish last year when he was in the decisive move then. He's in trouble now.
Well, he's pretty much towards the end of his career now, Rolf Sorensen. He's won this bike race before. He's won an awful lot of very big bike races, and I would think he's probably riding out his last season as a professional. Hincapie, despite the fact that he's got a few problems there, Phil, you can see, is still staying with this group. He's going to try and survive as long as possible and hope that his team car is going to manage to come forward. The time gap to the leading rider is still outside of 4.5 minutes as we go back to the main field and see a little bit of the chaos at the back end of the group, which has swollen quite largely in numbers now.
And back up with the leaders here. Sorensen, the winner of this race in 1972, the only Danish victory ever in the Tour of Flanders in its history. There he is, and like all good top pros, as he certainly has been, he's hanging on in there well. A few deep breaths. He's been through all the pain before. He knows what's required to stay with this group. Well, Hincapie, Paul, if he has got a problem, seems to be recovering from it.
I think he's just going to try not to panic. You see that move there? That really is a good piece of bike handling. You have to leap over any of these obstacles, because if you get it wrong when you catch the wheel on the side of those things, you go down pretty smartly.
Well, we've dropped one of the leaders here. I think Kasani has gone off the back.
Kasani, there was a quick glimpse there of Rolf's dad handing up a bottle. I'm not sure how legal that is in this day and age, but Rolf's dad seems to get everywhere out on the course, and he's followed his son for many years now through races like the Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, and to the Tour de France.
Well, every time I see Rolf's dad, who was himself an Olympic cyclist, I always say, how's Rolf going? He always says he's going great. And the thing is, he always is.
Consistent bike rider, that's what you really need to have as a top professional. Here's the main field now, starting again, wants to split up somewhat as they keep the pressure on the front end of the fold. You see the crowds there running off. They're running off to the cars to try and get to another vantage point.
They hardly have waited to see the
Flanders.
riders through before they dash off to the next corner. I'm just wondering how much they actually see.
Well, there's a bit of a competition amongst the followers to see how many times you can actually see the Tour of Flanders. And it gets a bit crazy out there sometimes, trying to get from point to point out on the course.
Well, 8 riders getting themselves together here. You can see by the angle of the echelon that the wind is coming across them right now as we fan through. This has become a duo struggle amongst the leaders today. They haven't been given a chance at all. Now, is this Peter van Petegem making his way forth? It looks as though it might be, and that's Museo I think he's with. So this is an interesting move now.
Well, that's definitely the style of Johan Museo now. Now, these two guys, they've seen what's happening. They realize, too, that George Hincapie is a serious contender for the overall win here today. So they've decided the group was too large behind, so they've decided they'll try and come off. And now this is Nardello coming across.
Well, this is developing now, because we've got Misalia, Hincapie, Taffy, Sorensen up front, and I think possibly still hanging there somewhere Enrico Casani. But now we've got 3 major guns firing here in Museo, Van Petegem, and just arriving the champion of Italy, Daniele Nardello, who has, you know, hurt his arm in a crash into Boulogne last year and limped right the way through the Tour de France, refused to give up, and he actually got better. But that was a very serious arm injury. Then in the Tour Down Under this year, before the race started, he fell off again on the same elbow, and he had it bandaged up the next morning when I saw him, and I said, are you still having problems with that elbow from the Tour de France? He says, no, another crash yesterday.
Well, they're not going to get any help from him as we rejoin the lone leader, Erwin Tyson. You can see just how difficult it's getting for him right now. He's doing a great job, though, Phil, because he's still holding on to a 4-minute advantage, but he's going to lose most of that very rapidly soon, and I would think we'll very shortly see the big leaders of the Tour of Flanders off the front, battling it out. Almost certainly the decision will come, as it nearly always does, on the Mur de Grammont, and that is still around about 30 kilometers from here.
It's a great ride. 4 minutes and 47 kilometers to go. We'd give it him on a flat race to the finish, but unfortunately for him, A, it's not flat, and B, this is the Ronde van Vlaanderen, and they don't give you anything at all. He's had a great day out, though, whatever happens to him in the end. I'm sure he'll ride home to the finish to a big cheer, as things are happening behind all of the time now. And this looks as though we've got a reshuffling of the pack here. Just sitting at the back here, the 225 is Jan Koos. He's been caught now from the breakaway, original breakaway, remember. Little show of defiance perhaps before he finally throws the towel in. He's been picked up by the Hincapie group. There's Gabriele Misaglia, who is a very good sprinter if it comes down to that. Not someone George would like to take to the finish, I'm sure of that.
Well, George has still got a little problem with his machine there. He consistently keeps looking down as we go down the group a little bit. There is Museo and Peter van Petegem and Daniele Nardello. They have made a great tactical move here. They've waited for that breakaway to establish itself, and they've decided just how dangerous it is, and they're leaping off the front. It's good to see, and in fact reminds me to the big comeback year of Johan Museo when he was in the breakaway with Peter van Petegem. On that occasion, Van Petegem got the victory, and Johan Museo had to settle for third place, but it was incredible to see him coming back after that dramatic accident that he had at the Paris-Roubaix the previous year.
Well, this is a very interesting move. Now, I think that those three were wise to counter the move. It's unfortunate for George Hincapie, I think, but they're going to get on here, and this is going to make what for me would be a race-winning breakaway with all of these senior riders making the gap. Little man at the back here just about hanging on, Jan Koos from the Vlaanderen 2000 team. He's just trying his best just to see how long he can stay on. He's inviting everybody else to come and do the work because he's got no legs left at all. But just thinking about Gabriele Misaglia, Paul, the Tour of Italy, there he is, number 63, stage winner in the Tour of Italy back in 1997. I think you were probably in Langkawi when he won the Tour of Langkawi, which was a great stage race win for him. And he's also had a World Cup win in the Hughes Cup and third in the Amstel Gold. So he's a well-tried rider. He's also into his 30s now, although he still seems to be very young to me.
But he's still got a lot of enthusiasm and still wants to try and get himself into situations like this. You can see now that this move by Museo and Peter van Petegem here has been absolutely perfect. They're riding across the gap right now, and Museo, as always, very tactical in his riding position here. They're not too happy by the fact that they're not getting any help at all from Daniele Nardello. Well, the reason for that is that Andrea Tafi is in that front group, so they shouldn't even think about asking him to come to the front right now. They'll try every maneuver that they can to get him to the front, and the two Belgians have succeeded.
Yes, and well, he may as well finish it off, but or is he? No, he's not going to. Oh, and you see, this is typical Museo. Persuades Nardello to go to the front and then attacks him as soon as he can get behind him. But Nardello's a bit long in the tooth for that one, and he's got the legs. But he's going to hurt him now as he climbs onto the Eichenberg. As you can see, it's 11%, not as steep as the one we've had, but it is a kilometre long, this climb. And Nardello comes up, and they've caught at the right time, I think, with the leader still 4:21 ahead.
It'll be very difficult now here for Jan Koos as they come onto the Eichenberg, because he's really now riding with the heads of state of the Tour of Flanders. These are the big men who we expected to see towards the front. Interestingly enough, unfortunately for Stefano Zanini, he's been caught out there, and you see Misaglia too having a bit of problems with the early part of this Eichenberg climb. It is a fairly good cobblestone climb, this one, and you see how, in fact, the organization have put barriers down the side there. A little bit further up, there's a steel separation to stop the riders from being able to ride on the tarmac, which is at the side of the road.
Oh, how unfair. Nardello then looking over his shoulder there. I think we'll say goodbye to poor old Jan Koos here, because he's the rider who is sitting now at the back of the group alone. He's doing a little bit more than sitting there right now. He's actually looking very solid. This is Cassani deciding the best place to be is at the front if you're in trouble on the climbs, and slow them all down to your pace. So he's riding extremely well, and Mappe all of a sudden now numerically have an advantage here. Well, I suppose Domo do as well, because Cassani...
The problem there, somebody stopped at the side of the road, and I think that may well have been George Hincapie's US Postal Service car, managed to get themselves forward, and I think Hincapie there has stopped at the side of the road.
Well, let's hope he can recover from whatever the problem is. It's been very consistently against him the whole time, and important enough to change on a climb. So it must be a bike change, Paul.
I think it must be. He must have been waiting and waiting for his team to come up. They came up very rapidly indeed. A lot of the team managers actually take portable televisions into the team car so they can put it in the back and have the mechanic keep an eye on it. Then that gives the mechanic a very good chance to know just exactly what problem the rider is having. Hincapie is now no longer in this group. He's disappeared from it, but I think he got himself a very quick change. In fact, it looks as if there's a US Postal rider coming back.
Well, let's hope so, because we don't wish bad luck on anybody, and it's going to take away a lot of fun for us today in what has been a superb tour. Now, this is an attack here by Cassani. No, it's not. It's Fassa Bortolo. He's trying to get himself Michele Bartoli coming up. Yes, a big effort here. He's going past Jan, unfortunately, who's now blown, Jan Kijks. A big return, so this is a desperate effort here by Bartoli, obviously sensing back in the pack. He's got to get up to the front, otherwise the front is going to leave him behind. Well, it's a serious enemy of the leaders if he gets across Bartoli. That's the end, and full of cramp too is the very brave Jan Kijks from Vlaanderen 2002. He'll go backwards now, but he's going to be replaced to keep the number at 9 in this group, because Bartoli is flying up the Eichenberg.
Great move. You saw exactly what he'd done here. He waited until he came to one of the cobbled climbs and used that as a launch pad to get across the group, because he knows the big names are starting to force a serious move off the front of the group here. It looks as if Hincapie is reintegrated into that group as we take a little look back down the road there. I think the next person we will see will be Michele Bartoli riding across the gap. There he is in the white jersey. He's not much more than 20 seconds behind right now. I think Hincapie had a very quick change there and managed to get back before they reached the summit of the Eichenberg.
Clearly premeditated, but the irony is that had he not had a good change, he would have caught the Bartoli Express and they would have gone back as a tandem. But as it happens, George has recovered well. But if Bartoli does get across, then we are going to seriously see a big change of tactics among the leaders. There are too many favourites getting up front.
A lot of favourites, but they're having hard rides to get across the gaps right now. That's the group of there. You see, it was the US Postal Service car which had managed to get itself across to Georgie Hincapie.
Yep.
I can tell you one thing, Dirk de Mol must have been right behind the referees there, pushing and pushing and pushing to try and get himself by, because he knew George had a serious problem. And that's when a team manager really pays for his salary, when he can get through and up to the leading break like that, change the wheel, and then it doesn't matter now. George is back in the bike race, back in the leading group, and I think probably right now breathing a sigh of relief.
You can bet your life, and hats off too to Dirk de Mol, the lone expert when he won Paris-Roubaix after a long breakaway with Thomas Wegmüller many years ago. That was his big claim to fame, and now he's a team manager with US Postal. Here's the composition of the break as we have it just now. Gone now is Jan Kijks, but shortly I think he's going to be replaced by Michele Bartoli, a much better chance for the overall win. As we look down now, we're forgetting almost that up the road by 4 minutes exactly is Erwin Thijs, with just over 25 miles to run down to the finish. This is Andrea Taffy now on the Capelleberg, which leaves us 42 kilometers to go. 222 have passed under the wheels now, and 200 of them Erwin Thijs has been leading.
Taffy on the front there you can see now Georgie Hincapie. Johan Museo looking very comfortable, very strong. It's amazing, this guy. You see a lot of riders, when they try and conserve energy, use a small gear on the climbs like this if the pressure's not really on. But Museo is such a strong powerhouse, and Taffy's not very happy either right now.
I don't know what Taffy was doing there. He says, I'm not doing it, come and give me a hand here. And Cassani, the only win Cassani's ever had is a stage of the Tour of Italy. Well, he's come up and done his bit. But it's unusual to see an Italian ride on a predominantly Belgian team. The legs have gone here, and it looks as though he tried to fly across the gap and he hasn't made it.
Well, he got to within 20 seconds. It was a brilliant move, perfectly timed, and he's going to find himself right now back in the main field.
Well, that's a surprise. That's not the Michele Bartoli of old. He had the move, he had the will, he knew what to do, and he didn't make it.
Well, that is a major surprise, and in fact it looked just a few moments ago, in fact, as if Rolf Sørensen was going out at the back of this group with Gabriele Misaglia. This group now doesn't look very much more than 5 or 6 riders. Here's Museo on the left-hand side, there's Nardello. A little further back, Hincapie, Taffy, Cassani is still in there, Peter van Petergem. And just look, I think Rolf Sorensen has used his experience once more just to nick onto the back of this group.
Well, there should be 8 riders here because we've lost Kykes. So as we go over the top of hill number 11 of 16, we'll see what we can count. Because certainly Van Petegem is here now. Yes, and tagged on the back. Looks like second from the end wheel is Rolf.
And also Misaglia recovered as well. Those guys were in serious difficulty there because they were going off the back, but they did. Again, when you're a bike rider, if you find, look at this. Well, that's amazing.
Maybe this is why Bartley thought wiser. He could sense that the race was coming back, and he's gone back in. There he is, the man in white, because he sensed another split forming here, and he's trying to grab the first train out. This is a battle of the riders today, Paul. They are fighting for everything. Tom Boonen there is bringing across another small group, the US boy. They're not giving up, are they? This is huge, this peloton now.
I thought we were looking actually at the winning break there a few moments ago. The big names were there. They were working well together. There's Ludo Dirksen in the Lamprey jersey there. Rolf Aldag coming through. Mario Cipollini is there as well. But the face of this race is about to completely change. I think it's going to reform, and then we'll see the race starting up once more. 5 big climbs left to go. The next big climb they'll be looking at is the Leiberg. But in the back of all of these riders' minds, the climb that they always think about is the Muur de Grammont, Gerardsbergen. That is where the real legs start to tingle. That's where the big attacks come. This is the lone leader we're looking at on the top of the picture there. He still holds 3 minutes and 41 seconds.
He's not thinking about the Muur, he's thinking about every hill that comes his way right now. He takes it one by one. He says, I'm beginning to crack, and crack big time. He can afford to smile low. It's nice when you've got a sense of humour at this stage of the day in the Tour of Flanders. And certainly Erwin Thijs has earned every accolade which will be bestowed upon him when he gets home tonight. In the lead now for over 200 kilometres. We're back with the chase group sitting down at 3:41 behind him. Sitting at the back here, Gabriele Misaglia, who we'll see at dinner tonight because he's staying in our hotel, and we'll ask him what was going on. And just ahead of him is Johan Museeuw and George Hincapie and Peter Van Petegem. 3 big favourites to win the race today, but there's trouble not far behind them.
The gap is not very much at all. It's not very much more than 100 meters or so. But the thing is, when you're in a race situation like this, these guys will keep sharing the pace making. They will keep a constant speed, while in the group behind there may be accelerations and decelerations, but if they don't organize themselves, they will find that this group will start to consolidate and build up an advantage.
There's little Nardello. Cassani, this is Museeuw, his teammate. Misaglia, little sprinter he is too. Peter Van Petegem, red hot form for him. Rolf Sorensen, big George Hincapie, showing us what a great bike rider he really is now. This is a most interesting group now, and Andrea Taffy, as usual, doing all of the work. Here's Cassani. As I say, he won stage 12 of the Giro d'Italia in May 2000. That's his only victory as a pro. He turned pro back in 1997.
These guys looking over their shoulders all the time. They know, and they're listening to the crowd at the side of the road who shout up all kinds of information. Most of these people now in this area of Belgium will be running into the house to see just exactly how the race is developing, then coming out again to try and put themselves at the side of the road to see the race come by. Mark Wouters now, the leader of Rabobank after that very unfortunate accident of Eric Dekker. He's trying to ride across the gap. The reason he's doing this right now is because he doesn't have any teammates in the group to try and organize the chase on the front, and he's getting a little bit frustrated with the blocking tactics of teams like this big team here, Team Mappé, who have got still 3 or 4 riders in this very large group. Lance Armstrong, by the way, is in this group of chasers, and he'll just sit back and see how the race develops, because for the moment he has advantage George Hincapie.
Absolutely, that's what he told us at the start, wasn't it? And he can now have a little bit of an armchair position for the moment, at least. Pressure's off him. And I think the only reason this breakaway is surviving right now is because there are so many Mappé riders back in that chase group as doing the spoiling tactics. Otherwise, I think they would have been up here 2 or 3 kilometers ago.
Well, that's always been the big strength of the Mappé squad, especially in these big one-day races. The fact that they have so many riders in the finales, and that is why Lance Armstrong decided to come to this bike race this year to help George Hincapie, and his reasons were absolutely perfect, because right now there is only George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong left in with the real chance of doing something in the Tour of Flanders. But I have to take my hat off to Tom Boonen, the 21-year-old Belgian that US Postal have signed up, because he's been dropped several times, Phil, and he's fought his way back into the group because he wants to help the team as long as possible.
This is the spirit which now is endemic within the US Postal team. It's not just riding for Lance Armstrong, which they do in the Tour de France, it's now riding for George Hincapie in the Spring Classics. And they get confidence by their success. They've had a wonderful start to the year. And this man, Tom Boonen, is clearly a classy bike rider. Now, the man who's got the responsibility of the team today, here he is, George Hincapie, looking for Ghent-Wevelgem and Paris-Roubaix.
He has changed his bike there because he doesn't have a race number on it at all. So there must have been a very smart, slick bicycle change there by the Team US Postal Service, as Rolf Sorensen seems to be asking to have a car come forward and hand up a drink, and somebody's doing the honourable thing.
I was going to say he's waving at fresh air there, but at least he got a neutral service have come up, and he wants some food as well. Because just like in Paris-Roubaix, in this race too, because of the narrow roads, they use motorcycles as neutral service to help all of the riders, of course. Just on 3 minutes the break now, as we head on to this 2 kilometre stretch now of cobblestones. So Rolf will do well to hold on to both sides of the handlebars. Life's about to get bumpy again.
Well, you can see just looking back from that group of riders, they've taken all the cars out of the gap. But looking down the road just a few moments ago, it seems as if the gap is starting to stretch out once again. And it's still hovering at the 30 to 40 second mark. And we keep forgetting that there is still one lone leader off the front of this bike race, making a lonely way towards the finish line in Merbeek, Erwin Thijs. But shortly he will get a chance to see the chasing group behind. Sorensen taking on board there one of those very famous drinks, but it's the wrong time to take it on board just now as we hit this climb. That's a product called Extran that many of these riders use, and it has around about 500 calories in that small little package.
Well, he's going to need all of them right now, but as I said, he does need both hands on this stretch of the road. So teeth are a very useful addition to the human body as we now continue towards the Leberg, which comes at the end of this cobble stretch. So this is a nice softening up process before the climb. Meanwhile, on the climb now, this is Erwin Thijs. It is really hurting him now. Doesn't need me to tell you that. He's on what is now the 5th from last climb of the day. And just over the top, he'll have a mere 20 plus miles to the finish. And it's going to be too far for him.
It really is tough. 16% at the steepest part of the climb right now. The next 3 climbs are in fact well pavemented climbs. They're tarmac climbs. This climb, the Leberg, followed by Berendries and then Ten Bosch. And then after that they'll be heading down into Gerardsbergen for the very difficult cobble climb of the Muur de Grammont. This guy is just surviving right now. He knows his time is coming down slowly but surely, and it's amazing that he will keep riding like this up until the very last moment when he's caught by either the front end of the main field or the whole field, which could at any time come back together.
He might reach the Berendries, but it could be on that climb where they'll catch him. Now we're looking back here at moments ago, Fred Rodriguez, and a little bit of a problem here because this is Frank Hoy coming up for Team Coast. Now we'll see what happens, because I don't know why. Well, I'm not sure why they showed us that, but Frank Hoy coming up there behind Freddy Gonzalez.
The only thing I can say is
Freddy
he wasn't
Rodriguez,
happy.
sorry, he wasn't happy. No, well, it wasn't our fault. We're watching television just like you are. These are the chasers now. Remember that there were 9. We've lost Kykes. 8 are surviving. Bartoli didn't make it. They're now over the top of the climb as well. Still well organised, and I think going clear for the moment. There's got to be one desperate final reaction from those who are trapped in the second group behind to reach these leaders as soon as they can. Otherwise, they'll be out of contention.
Sorensen at the back here. Just amazing, this bike rider, Phil. He's been a professional for so many years right now, and it's at the big days like this that he uses all of that intelligence that a lot of bike riders do have. He has the ability to get himself into the winning breaks. He turned professional 16 years ago, back in 1986, and he's been at the top ever since.
Even I was a young man then. It's a long time ago, but Rolf has been one of those guys that he actually speaks English so well he enjoys our commentating, can you believe? And he often records the shows so he can go and see how we've criticised him at the end of the race. So far we've managed to avoid shouting at us.
Well, he's always been at the front of the bike race, so we haven't had too much time to criticise him. Taffy now takes up the pacemaking here on this very difficult climb of the Leberg. Van Petegem knows this climb. This is where he launched the brilliant attack just a few days ago on the first stage of the 3 days of La Panna. He got beaten on that occasion by Stefano Zanini in the sprint for the line. But certainly these are all very much his training roads that he's on right now. It's becoming a bit more tactical on the steeper climbs.
We're getting 1 or 2 passengers as well, Paul. I think Misalia is tired. Sorensen is riding a crafty race, but he will ride at the back and then try to jump away. He won't want to go to the finish with any of these riders. He's not a sprinter. Misalia may be doing it for the opposite reasons. He is a sprinter, so why doesn't he just wait till the sprint? I think decisions will probably come on the Muur. They may do a little bit of a softener on the Berendries, which is the next climb up, but we'll see. There's the clock counting down on the left of your screen now, as it's counting the riders through, and it stopped at 2:29. Well, he may not make the Berendries.
He may not make it, but it's 4 kilometers now to go from the summit of here to the Berendries, so he should survive that distance. But I think we may well see an attack come on Berendries right now, because 1 or 2 guys in this group, like Taffy and like Johan Museo, will be getting a little bit upset by the fact that, as you say, there seem to be 1 or 2 passengers appearing in this breakaway, and we might be able to just stroke 3 or 4 riders off the back, and that will then make a very strong, serious working group. The lone leader still surviving, Erwin Thijs. He's been at the front of this bike race for 230 kilometers right now, and he certainly has paid his contract back to Koolstrop Polmans this year, because he's been on TV for the last 2.5 hours.
Indeed, and we've got 3 previous winners, let's not forget, in this chase group. In Peter Van Petegem, who won in 1999, 3-time winner Johan Museo, and Rolf Sorensen, who also won. He won in 1997. So they all know the Tour of Flanders pretty well. This is a very select group of bike riders. Now we're pulling back. Let's have a little look. It says 25 seconds on the top of our picture. Might be a bit more just now, but in fact it's 25 seconds on this little group they're trying to get across. It is more to the main field. 4 riders in that chase. They split up now because there's 5, and Fred's in this chasing group of 4 here. But again, I think they're going to. This is the one Frank Hoyd joined, so that's why our director showed us the shot. Frank Hoyd coming up to them.
Well, this is why it's so important to be on a big team when you come to these one-day classes. Freddie Rodriguez here is not going to do anything at all to help this group get across, because his man Johan Museo and Cassani are in the front. The same also goes for Stefano Zanini, who's in this group as well. He won't be. In fact, it's Laszlo Bodrogi who's got into this group. It looked like Zanini, and in fact another comeback. This is another group, and here's Armstrong. Armstrong has got himself into this little counter-attack. Yeah. He is riding a very clever race for himself. If anything happens at all at the front and they do come back, you better watch out for Lance Armstrong.
Absolutely. This is the race he tended to ride from the moment he started this race. But he's got some wonderful form this year. We're seeing Lance Armstrong now develop not just a stage race rider. Pre-Cancer Days, a single-day rider. He is now just a very, very good bike rider, and so clever. And if it came to a closing down of that breakaway, well, I know where I'd be putting my money.
I know where a lot of people have put their money already, and it's on the man who wears their number 211 for US Postal Service, Lance Armstrong. But he has so far ridden true to his word. He's done everything he can to make George Hincapie come into this bike race in the ideal situation. But he now is forcing everybody else to do the chasing. You see, it is so tactical right now. It's a big battle between the Domo team and the Mappé squad of Italy.
The average has dropped down a little bit now by 1.5 kilometers an hour as we roll towards the end. Remember, we've picked up the headwind now. It's a much harder course as we come into these hills. These 9 riders just come together. How nice to see so many Americans in the thick of the action here, with Fred Rodriguez as well as Hincapie and Lance Armstrong. I would just like to say we had a British rider in the breakaway as well, but no signs of Max Chandry.
Or Brad Wiggins, the young rider who was drafted in at the last moment.
Back there today, Paul. He's going to go home with some stories tonight.
Well, it's a serious christening when you come to the Tour of Flanders as your first ever major one-day classic, and I think he will come back in years to come with a much different view of this bike race. But I think he certainly will have gained him an awful lot of experience. Armstrong very happy to sit at the back here.
Ooh, meanwhile, back at the front here, that's the right thing to say. We're on the Leberg, I think. Yes, the Berendries. Sorry, we've had the Leberg, of course we have. Berendries, and this is the climb where I figured they might catch him, but he's still got 2 minutes. He could be taking them onto the 10 boss. Let's hope he can, but it's a 5-kilometer ride across to the 3rd to last climb of the day. 20 miles are just about left in this Tour of Flanders, An extraordinary race, a battle of tactics behind. 3 pass winners have now got themselves into that chase group of 8. And behind, Armstrong is still battling it out in a group of 9 chasers there.
It's amazing to look here at the Berendries. I don't think I've ever seen so many people turning out for this bike race. They say that cycling is suffering at the moment and the crowds aren't turning out, but I think this absolutely contradicts such a statement. This is a massive crowd at the Tour of Flanders. As we look here at Erwin Thijs, his advantage now, Phil, coming inside the 2-minute margin.
Yeah.
And very shortly he will get pulled up one moment or another, but what a magical memory this will give to this bike rider.
Well, remember too that these people have been watching this race live on television for a couple of hours now. They know the effort of Erwin Thijs in his own country because they are politely applauding him as he climbs up. They know he's not going to win the Tour, but they know that he's given it his best shot. And I even saw the police applauding as he came up.
Well, even the police can take sides here in Belgium because this is basically the Belgian Championships. This is the most important race for them, almost more important than the World Championships because it is the Championship of Flanders. The Vlaamse, the Flemish Lion, is the man who is in this group right now in 3rd position there, Johan Museeuw. Probably, I would say, Phil, most categorically riding his last Tour of Flanders because he has promised everybody that he will retire at the end of this season.
Yes, and we'll miss him. But now we're with the chase group of select riders here. Daniel Nardello on the right, George Hincapie on the left. This is the group containing Wal Sorensen, number 231. Taffy is there as well, as Paul said. Missalia, Enrico Cassani, Museeuw and Van Petegem. That's the combination. They are on the climb of the Berendries to take them up to 32 kilometers from the finish. Hincapie is still there and very much alive in this race despite a bike change. And he got it at the right time. It's kept him in the hunt.
Pedaling style pretty good there on George Hincapie. He's a little bit too far back. I would have wanted to be in 3rd or 4th position right now because I wouldn't be surprised to see an acceleration come from Peter Van Petegem or Johan Museeuw in 2nd and 3rd place. But Hincapie's pedaling style is very good and relaxed at the moment. He's in the situation he wanted to be. He's a little nervous, though. You see several times he's looked over his shoulder there just to see if there's any possibility of the return of that group from behind. Over the summit of this climb, they have 30 kilometers to go to the finish. That's around about 18 miles. But the most important thing is that they will face very shortly the Mur de Grammont, and that's when all of the legs will be giving full pain to try and get over as quickly as possible. Here's the Armstrong group. They're not very much more than 30 seconds behind, Phil.
No, and there's the lineup for you. Mark Wouters, Zeberg, Zanini is in there, no help from him. Matin, Schultz, who's the guy coming back from the original breakaway, remember. He was, Ronnie Schultz was one of the 4 riders, and only Erwin Thijs remains out front, so he's having a wonderful day as well. He's in that group. He won't stay there for over the Mur de Grammont, I wouldn't suspect. Achtervolgers means the pursuers, the chasers. And there they are with Sorensen still riding as the ticket collector, just off the back of the group here, allowing Nardello to slip in and do his follow through in the line. So Sorensen's either shamming or he is taking a little bit of a bad one at the moment.
I think he probably is taking a bit of a bad one because just a few moments earlier on a climb, just a couple of climbs ago, he and Gabriel Misaglia were tailed off. So he's got to try and use as much experience as possible right now. He will try and stay in contact if he can on the climbs. That time gap now is absolutely plummeting. It's now down to just over 1.5 minutes advantage for the lone leader.
Look at this, Paul, 28 seconds to the Armstrong group coming back.
Well, we'd said that Armstrong would come to this bike race with ambition. He's riding a very good race for him just now because he hasn't had to do very many hard efforts out on this course. He's been riding a defensive race for George Hincapie. But if it all comes back together before the Mur de Grammont, and this is a question I asked Armstrong before the start, what would the situation be if you were in a small group of 10 or 15 riders with George Hincapie? And his answer was, I'll wait for Hincapie, but I wonder if he will.
You know, these things have a habit of happening, don't they? Well, you saw the descent speed there, just under 80 kilometers an hour. This is Missalia looking over his shoulder, and this and poor old Rolf here is desperate for a drink, and he'd like them to get on with it, please. He's trying to hang on. I think he's very close to hitting the wall.
He's pretty close, but he's a tough bike rider, and he realizes this is a superb opportunity, especially as you get towards the end of your career, to be in a group like this. He's in with the super favorites before the start of the race: George Hincapie, Peter van Petegem, and of course Johan Museeuw. So he will use every tactic that he can to try and stay in this group for as long as possible. But you know, when you do come to the Muur de Grammont, it's absolutely impossible to hide, and that's when the real men who are suffering right now will hit the wall.
Well, he's taken on as much as he can take on here, so that's a sure sign. He knows he is close to blowing up, and let's hope he doesn't, because he's not far from the finish. 30 kilometers to go for the leader, remember, who is still 90 seconds in front. Once was nearly 20 minutes, but he's going to get caught. He might just get onto the lower slopes of the 10 Bos, which will take him to the 26 kilometers to ride. Here's George wisely stoking up for what is going to be a very explosive last 3 climbs today. I'm not sure, because this has been such a tough race, they are riding into a headwind as well, whether these riders can risk breaking away for the finish.
Not just yet. I think the only chance is that somebody would try and go clear on the Bosberg, because from the top of the Muur de Grammont to the finish, it's going to be a block headwind, because the wind is coming out of the east, and it really has been on the riders' faces for the last hour or so since they came away from the top of the Muur de Grammont. You see Museeuw always slipping to the back of the group. He goes back to have a check and see what the situation is on the other riders. He wants to see this little discussion going on here right now between Taffy and Nardello.
Yeah.
He wants to know exactly what is going on in all of these bike riders' minds all of the time. He is the master tactician in this breakaway, but I wonder if he's got the form this year to try and win it. And strangely enough, looking at the two Mappe guys, they were formerly his teammates.
That's absolutely right, yes, and I'm sure Museeuw remembers that. We're looking at the leader here in the top of the screen as it was, and he's approaching the 10 Bos climb of 1.7 kilometers to it. A minute 21. This man is on automatic pilot now. He's totally exhausted.
Just hoping to survive. He's through the streets of Brakel now, which every bike rider knows. Nearly every bike race in Belgium has to go through at one stage or another. But this climb now, the 10 Bos, is really going to hurt him, because it is, again, a very good covered road up here, but it's very steep when he gets up to the top, and it'll hurt his legs an awful lot. You see, he's having a hard time just keeping the gear ticking over right now. In fact, look at that, it's come down to a minute 20, so he may well lose it all on the slopes of this climb.
Well, this breakaway goes down in the annals, Paul, doesn't it, of the scope of Jackie Giron's win in 1992. He's not going to win, and once he is caught, he is going to go through all kinds of hell riding the last few kilometers, because the impetus and the adrenaline will be out of him, and I just hope he finishes the course after he gets caught. But here we go onto the slopes of 10 Bos, and as I say, he's on automatic pilot. The crowd now are getting more enthusiastic every time he approaches a climb, because they know what he's done, they know how long he's been out front, and now all they want to do is catch a glimpse of him.
Well, the Belgians love heroes, and this man certainly has been the hero of the day, the man of the match here on the third climb to go to the finish, 10 Bos. 26 kilometers to go from the summit here, and in the streets of Brakel is that chasing group right now. And look at the time, it's coming down very dramatically. That man, I think, Phil, will, even when he's caught, he will try and hang on for as long as possible and try and ride himself down to the finish line here in Meerbeke.
I'm not sure. I think psychologically he'll be beaten when this group comes up. They're still working well together, and Cassani setting the pace here, having a chat with his countryman but not his teammate Gabriele Massaglia. But I think Enrico Cassani hasn't got a lot left myself in those legs. He looks as though he's suffering. Here comes the smooth pedaling Andy Taffy, followed by Nardello. Just wondering whether they've got the winner in this group, though, and whether Mappe should use their strength and close this down, because I'm not sure these two guys will carry this race to the bitter finish. 10 Bos, they're right behind the leader now at just on 1 minute. The cool Mr. Poker Face himself, Johan Museeuw. He will go on the Muur de Grammont. I'd bet my socks on it, because that's the climb where he always attacks. And remember, he's won this race, a record equaling 3 times. One more, he is the man of Flanders, and it's in his twilight year.
Well, look at this, the face of Peter van Petegem as well. These guys there at home, they really love this bike race. They live for this bike race. It is the most important day of the year for Johan Museeuw and Peter van Petegem. Hincapie quite happy there to sit at the back of the group in 8th position. Museo, his face there, Phil, does not give anything away at all. He is so calm and collected. And Kasani, as you say, I think really is suffering right now, but he knows he's just got to suffer just a little bit longer to try and give his leader the chance of a win today for the 4th time, and that would be history.
Almost 100 wins under those wheels of Johan Museo in a career which started back in 1988. This one would be the sweetest, I would suggest. Well, the last win always is. It proves you can still do it, I suppose. But looking down now at the very select breakaway, which will shortly sweep up the leader, who survives as we head out now towards the Muir itself.
This is the Armstrong group, and they're not too far behind either. They can't be very much more than 25 or 30 seconds, and Armstrong is having a great day here, just sitting at the back of the group, riding a very defensive role, and something he doesn't always have to do. And I would say psychologically he's enjoying the Tour of Flanders today. That's Mark Wouters, the Rabobank rider, wearing 21, just coming onto the back of the group. Frankie Hoy is in there in the yellow jersey for Team Coast as well. But there's not an awful lot of impetus and organisation in this group, because there's a lot of tactical manoeuvring going on. Obviously, the 2 Mapei riders don't want to work, and Freddie Rodriguez either doesn't want to either.
So it looks like it's 42 seconds there. So they've lost a little bit on that climb. Wouters, rather than coming on, I think he's coming back on, Paul, because I think he was dislodged on the climb, but he's got himself back on. And, well, the gap is opening again just a bit, as we're now heading out towards Gerardsbergen and the climb of the Wall of Grammont. That comes at the top. It's just 15 kilometers left to ride. So I suppose they are about 8 kilometers from the climb itself, at least the leader is.
They have 10 to 12 miles of riding on these smooth open roads right now, and psychologically they'll all be getting ready for what is going to be a very difficult Mur de Grammont. They will know now that the race is in their grasp, but they will try and encourage the other riders in the group to come forward and work together. It seems as if there aren't too many passengers right now in this group. Everybody realizes now, as they get the time gaps coming up to them all of the time, that there is a very serious group behind, containing Armstrong and Zanini. And they are, as you say, 42 seconds back. We're now 25 kilometers to go to the finish.
Well, and he's just inside a minute for the leader, Erwin Thijs. 57 seconds. This is one of the 2 greatest single-day classics in the world. The other is Paris-Roubaix. I never know which one I like best, Paul, but this one is always a joy to commentate on.
Well, each one has its own specific attractions, and I think the attraction about this race, the Tour of Flanders, is that it's got so many cobblestones. It's almost got as much cobblestones as Paris-Roubaix, but they are all uphill, and that's the remarkable thing about it.
I know that Sean Kelly regrets never having won this. He came so close. I think it was 3 occasions. He was up there in 2nd place, but he never quite got the win. He was beaten by some surprising non-sprinters as well. Kicked himself right around his Irish living room. But he never got the win in this race, which everybody wants to win.
Johan Museo has won it 3 times there. You've got the team manager there of Lotto coming forward. That's Jos Brakeveld talking there to Peter van Pittegem. You can see the difference in the style of the man on the left-hand side there, Erwin Thijs. He really is suffering like a dog at the moment. He just is hoping that he can stay off the front a little bit longer, but he knows almost certainly before the Mur de Grammont he will get caught by the heads of state of this year's Tour of Flanders. Museo, Phil, is up and down this group like a yo-yo. He's looking at the faces of all of the riders. He's not quite sure who is going to be the strongest man in the group, but he will certainly, I would think, try and launch some kind of an attack when we get to the slopes of the Mur de Grammont. But you know what? He is not going to get rid of Peter van Pittegem.
No, he's got to be afraid of him, because he was my favourite at the start, and he's got in the move. He's got to be the danger man here. He's got to be the rider who will want to take this race out. And there he is, taking the line through at the moment, as Massalia is asking for a drink. This group are still showing no concern for the man ahead. They're allowing him to come back to them. They know his legs won't take him to the finish, despite the fact he's inside 15 miles, that's all to go.
It's not very far after leaving Bruges this morning at 9:45. We're now coming up to 4:30 in the afternoon local time. These guys have been in the saddle for almost 6 hours of racing. Museo at the back of this group right now, keeping an eye on everybody else. Andrea Taffy, he will be thinking about winning this, and just watch out for the move here. This could be a sensible move. Taffy's going. He had his man Nardello on the front there, and Taffy trying to open a gap, but the man to respond is in the red and black jersey of Lotto. Peter van Pittegem is not going to give anybody a chance right now to move off the front of this group.
No, they were waiting for somebody to make the move, and there it was. It came from Andrea Taffy. Who else? Taffy's been a World Cup winner on many occasions, but he's never had a podium finish in the Tour of Flanders, and that would be a nice result for him today to make a top 3. He's not a great sprinter, so he's got to go on his own, I think.
Team car of Domo Farm Frites there coming alongside. It's Mark Sargent, the team manager for them today. In fact, Patrick Lefebvre, having had a little bit of a heart crisis a few years ago, having followed Paris-Roubaix, doesn't follow in the team car very often these days. He leaves it up to Mark Sargent, but you can be certain he's not far from the finish line here, watching all of this unfold on television.
A number of riders now want drinks and/or information, or both. They're all getting very, very nervous here now, and you don't allow Johan Museeuw to pedal calmly to the front, because he'll pedal calmly out of sight if you give him a chance. There's the gap. It's opening still to the Armstrong group, so I don't think we're going to see them come back at Zalandiger, but only 42 seconds to the catch of Erwin Thijs.
It's too tactical right now in the group behind. There are too many men there who want to sit on anybody who's doing the pacemaking. Armstrong is a great man to have in that group for George Hincapie. If Armstrong wasn't in that group, they may also think about riding a little bit harder to try and pull them back as well. Now watch this, Museeuw at the back of the group, tightening up the straps, and Taffy goes again.
Andrea Taffy will never let you down. What a great bike rider he is. He livens it up whenever it gets dull. Taffy's gone again. Nardello is getting the soft ride, which is what he wants, because Nardello is a very good single-day rider and has a little bit of a sprint as well. But Andrea Taffy needs to go alone, and if they play tactics, this is the man who will ride away with the 86 Tour of Flanders as he pedals now towards the second last climb of the day. But look at this, all back together. Reaction coming from George Hincapie.
Well, it's setting itself up now very nicely for the Mur de Grammont, which is not very much more than about 5 kilometers away from here. At the summit of the Mur de Grammont, there are 16 kilometers to go to the finishing line. And this group now of 8 riders are trying to figure out just exactly how they're going to handle it. But watch out for Museeuw, because in the past he's launched some pretty strange tactics. A few years ago, when everybody was waiting for the Mur de Grammont, he attacked on the Berendries and caught everybody by surprise and soloed 31 kilometers to the finish. So he's the kind of man who will wait for an opportunity to present itself, and if it does, he'll snatch it quickly.
Van Petegem going back for a word of advice. It's just on a minute now, this group ahead of the Armstrong group, but only 25 seconds behind the leader, Erwin Thijs. And 21 kilometers to go, and we go over the top of the Mur de Grammont with 15 left to ride.
There's the lone leader. After her long day in the saddle, 240 kilometers at the front of the bike race, he knows now that it's all over. He's not going to be the first man onto the Mur de Grammont as he was onto the Koppenberg. The first bike rider to reach the Koppenberg in 15 years in the Tour of Flanders. But for him now, they're cleaning up the gap behind him. And in fact, you can just see that group of 8 riders in the distance.
It's going to be very hard push now to get onto the slopes even of Gerardsberg and in the town itself. Daniel Nardello, he was 5th in this race last year, 1 place worse than Rolf Sorensen, the only 2 riders who placed in the top 7 men at the end of last year's Tour of Flanders. Taffy's gone back for a rest, but Sorensen, you see, doesn't give anybody a rest. He's opened up a little bit of a gap and wants that last position for as long as he can hang on to it. But Taffy's also in trouble. I think Massalia is also in trouble, Paul. He's really gritting his teeth. The strong men to me look to be Hincapie, Van Petegem and Museeuw.
20 kilometers to go now, Phil, and these guys almost certainly must be thinking about how to launch the attack. Missaglia and Rolf Sorensen have been the 2 weakest bike riders in the group so far. They've gone off the back several times, but they are both intelligent bike riders. They will use as little energy as possible when they're going to the front right now and try and conserve just a little bit of kick left to try and pull themselves back in over the summit of these climbs. But now watch out for Museeuw. Moving forward, he's keeping a very close eye on Andrea Taffy. He's very strong at the moment. The Flemish Lion, the man who I'm sure 99% of the crowd here at the finish line would love to have win.
Now we're panning forward, I'm afraid, to find Erwin Thijs. There he is, the lone man, the trailblazer of this year's Tour of Flanders. Broke away at circa 30 kilometers into this race today, and here we are 20 from the finish. So as we speak, 214 kilometers in the lead, and he's still going on. I'm not too sure about the red light flashing on that motorbike. I hope it makes it to the finish.
Something to do with too much hot pressure, I think, in the oil.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right, Erwin. It's all over for you, but what a great man. Now, Taffy again.
Ride.
Taffy, what a man. He's going to go again and again in this breakaway to try and outfox the Domo duo there of Kasani and Johan Museo. The man isolated here a little bit is Peter van Petegem.
We're just trying to listen there what they're saying at him from the back of the car. But unfortunately, Rolf is now able to speak with his own tongue, because he's now sponsored by a Danish team, which was a great ambition in his retiring years, was to ride for a home pro squad, which he's now doing and proving to be the best of the squad as well. And he's riding superbly, but he's tired. Remember, he did finish 4th last year, and he wasn't happy with that because he made a mess of the finish. And Daniel Nardello in the breakaway here, number 75, finished 5th. And now they're about to throw a net over the escaper of the day. The man of the match, as it were, Erwin Thijs, 220 kilometers in the lead, and now he is surrendering to a very elite group of bike riders. If he's got any legs to continue, then a high finish still awaits him in Meerbeker, because there aren't many riders left in this race.
Well, I reckon just about now the man with the big hammer is going to come along and bonk him on the head, because he really will be demoralized by the fact that he's been caught right now. He will try and survive, but there's no way after the breakaway that he's been in the lead for he will be able to survive on the slopes of the Mur de Grammont. But a great chance for him to see the heads of states. And
nice one, Taffy.
Taffy's a great bloke, coming up alongside there, just encouraging him and saying well done, and that's where they're going, Phil. The Mur de Grammont, the Muur van Heralsbergen, and this is where we, I think, are going to see this group split. But it's been so tactical so far. It's going to be amazing to see the big mano a mano, I think, which is going to happen between Peter van Petegem and Johan Museo. And I'm certain that George Hincapie's got the legs to follow.
Well, let's go the whole hog, Paul. I'll bet you €1 that Johan Museo launches the first attack.
I'm not sure I've got €1, Phil, but anyway, we'll go for $1. That'll do.
Okay. And that's it. 2 kilometers to the climb of the wall of Gerardsbergen, which is one of the centres, the epicenter, if you like, of racing in Flanders. This wall that stands out of the town. It is a vicious climb. Nobody's allowed to go over it except the riders in the race and the immediate officials, because they can't risk a car breakdown on it. They send them around and wait for the race over the top.
Very nervous now. These guys all know this race run-in now. All of these guys have been here before. They're just dropping down across the main road, over the bridge you can see in the distance there, through the center of Gerardsbergen, and then the climb will commence. The run into the climb has changed a bit over the last couple of years, and it makes it a very long ascent of the Mur de Grammont. And then once they get to the top, the organization have managed to wheedle out a few more cobblestones as well, and they take them up above the chapel, which really adds an extra 400-500 meters to this climb.
Well, who would like to be Erwin Thijs right now? The man knows what lies ahead of him. He knows how his legs are feeling after 220 odd kilometers at the head of the Tour of Flanders. He knows that very shortly the field will make the way left and then start the twisting climb up over the top of the wall. And he won't be there over the top, but let's hope he can grab a few riders, perhaps like Rolf Sorensen, and maybe produce a very good result.
Down into town right now. There's a huge crowd waiting for these riders. Kasani's doing the job now that the day was only expected to bring to him, to look after Johan Museo. Museo spot on for his rendezvous with the one-day classics. Next week he's got a chance at Paris-Roubaix. But this is the one, Phil, that I think he really wants. He should actually really have 4 wins, because he got beaten so narrowly in a 2-up sprint by Gianni Bugno. And I don't think he could understand at all why the Italian was able to get by him. And that was a very close photo finish, and a very sad Johan Museo at the end of that day.
But if you could get 4 now, what a way to end your career. And he was in all the papers as a hot favourite to get the 4th victory. Now we're doing the snakes across the market square here in Gerardsbergen. Very shortly now, as we say goodbye just about to Erwin Thijs, there'll be a left turn coming up, and then we start the cobbled approach to the top of the wall. And Peter van Petegem is in an excellent position now to launch an attack. Johan Museo is near the back at the moment, but that doesn't mean too much. He's got the back wheel of George Hincapie, in fact. He sent Kasani up here to keep the pace up as hard as he can go before he drops off. There's the hero now concentrating on just getting himself through to the finish in Meerbecker. He knows that once over the top of the wall, he has barely 10 miles to go, and I've just won myself a Euro, Paul, because there he goes.
Spot on. You knew he was going to do it. Everybody waited for that move there. Andrea Taffy's the first man to respond here. Peter van Petegem is there as well. This man knows the Muur de Grammont. He wants to hit them hard. He's got an advantage right now of around about 20 meters, but Peter van Petegem is going to try and slowly peg him back, and in third place there, looking pretty comfortable, is Georgi Hincapie. They've blown the race apart, but Van Petegem has come back to the wheel of the Lion of Flanders, and so too has Daniele Nardello.
Well, he's looked over his shoulder, he's seen it hasn't worked quite, so he's eased back, and he's got himself now just the 3 riders who have won the Tour of Flanders, including himself. One rider, Van Petegem, and himself, Museo. Hincapie, who would like to join the elite, is there. Nardello is there, and one rider just clawing his way back on has got to be Andrea Taffy.
Absolutely, making it 5 riders at the front of the group. That was a pretty vicious attack there by Johan Museo. He doesn't have that super form that he had a few years ago when he rode away from everybody on this slope. The man in command right now, though, is Peter van Petegem. Hincapie, Phil, responded very well there, and he is, I would say, right now, probably the fastest man in this group. We get a chance now just to see how far ahead of the rest of the group they are now. Just 5 men left. Van Petegem looks very relaxed indeed. He's setting the tempo. That's the best thing to do here, but watch out. Andrea Taffy's not shot his last bullet.
He's going to fire one right now as he comes over the top of George Hincapie. This is an amazing race. I think these guys are all committed now, and there's not a lot left in any of their legs. As Taffy locks up as he tries the move. Now it's the move by Peter van Petegem. Can George Hincapie dig deep? He'll have to, because Museo is now in trouble, and so too is Nardello. But there he goes again. This man is such a talent, and he's such an example to all young bike riders. He never gives up, ever.
That's all to do with his mind frame. He knew that the Muur de Grammont was going to be difficult. He attacked them to begin with. He just allowed these 2 guys to go, but he's waiting for the different grades, and that's why he's responded now. He's getting it into a bigger gear. He's going to ride now back onto the tail of Georgi Hincapie and Peter van Petegem. But watch out too for the 2 Mappé boys, because they are coming back as well. They're over the summit. 5 men lead the Ronde van Vlaanderen with 10 miles to go.
Unbelievable. And we're commentating obviously from the finishing line in Meerbecker, and the crowd here are watching a television just like we are, and they are roaring encouragement at the screen because they are seeing the attacking riding of the Belgian riders. I've had a thin time of it lately in the Tour of Flanders. And nice to see that still in here, look, behind Zanini is Fred Rodriguez. He's still in with World Cup points here today. Now, can we see the big figure of the leader? And Lance Armstrong off to the left. And surely Cipollini is somewhere in this pack. But you know, we could be saluting a new leader of the World Cup tonight, and it might well be Fred Rodriguez.
Well, he only needs a few points to get himself ahead of Mario Cipollini. He's ridden a brilliant race so far, but so too has Cipollini. Armstrong there looking very good and comfortable. Tom Boonen, also the young Belgian rider, is still in with a chance of a high finish here at the Tour of Flanders.
Really well.
And I think at the end of the day, Lance Armstrong will tap him on the shoulders and say, well done, young man, thanks for that.
You bet your life. Now, looking at the camera, so we didn't see Cipollini there at the moment. Back up to where the race is, and this is the front of the race now for the first time in about 5 or 6 hours. Museo is going to take a few deep breaths. Now, we used to call Van Hooijdonk the boss of the Bosberg because he won his races by attacking on the Bosberg, the last climb of the race. Now it's going to have to be left to somebody like Museo to go again. I don't think he can take this out in the sprint now.
He didn't have the big acceleration. 15 kilometers to go right now, and Taffy not very happy because it seems the impetus has gone out of this break. You saw Taffy on the front just now waving his arms, gesticulating, trying to get all of these riders to keep themselves organized, and they need to keep working together, Phil, because that large group with Zanini, Armstrong and Rodriguez are still not very much more than around about a minute behind. So if they mess around in this leading group of 5, they could find themselves being rather surprised by the return of what is rather a big group.
Which they don't want at this stage. 28 seconds, that's all they are behind. They're saying peloton, but I would have thought the remnants of the breakaway is probably at 28 seconds and the peloton just behind, but we'll find out. These are the 5 leaders of the Tour of Flanders. The sun now getting high in the sky. They left the marketplace in Bruges at 9:45 local time this morning. It is now 20 minutes to 5 in the afternoon. That is a long day by any standards riding in a bike race.
These are the chasers: Cassani, Rolf Sorensen, Gabriel Misaglia. We were pretty certain that both Sorensen and Misaglia were tired because we'd seen them suffer on a couple of previous climbs. But when you're in a situation like this at the Tour of Flanders, you have to use all of your experience. They suffered on the climb of the Mur de Grammont, but now they're trying to use every last bit of energy to get themselves back into this bike race.
Rolf Sorensen, these are the rides, I think, at 28 seconds. But there's not a lot left in the legs of either Sorensen or Misaglia. And I'm sure the same's got to be said of Cassani. He's done his job well. He gave it his best shot to launch his team leader on the wall, and now he's just having to survive. They're still fighting out 6th place, though, and that, even so, would be a great result for Rolf. But I think Misaglia might take the sprint there.
The 5 leaders now will be looking very shortly at attacking the Bosberg. The riders from Mapei are in the strongest position right now. They've got one man at the front, Andrea Tafi, one man at the back, Daniele Nardello. They are in the best tactical position right now to be able to launch one attack and then counter immediately afterwards. But I have a feeling that most of these guys are pretty nailed right now. They're having a hard time. They don't have the big accelerations. The man who looked the most comfortable on that climb was certainly Peter van Petegem.
Yep.
And he would love to win this bike race for a second time.
He still remains the favourite, I think, marginally so, perhaps over Hincapie now. Could be a shoulder-to-shoulder sprint there. The group is coming back. It's taking a while. They're knocking a second off every 500 meters or so of the chase. There's another one gone. It's down to 20 now. I'm not sure that they will allow those 3 back on, though. They must be extremely tired, because these boys aren't racing that fast now. There's another second knocked off. You never know, they might get back yet. Last climb of the day, the Bosberg, is on the horizon, and when we go over the top of that, there's just 12 kilometers or 7 miles to the finish.
I wonder what's going through Georgi Hincapie's mind right now. He's in an ideal situation. He's the fastest man in this group, but it's such a risk to wait for a group of 5 riders like this to go to the finish line, especially when you've got men like Tafi and Nardello in there as well. If Georgi's got brilliant legs, he needs to, for once in his life, take a super risk and try and launch himself off the front. If he feels as good as his pedaling action is telling me that he is, he maybe ought to try and surprise these guys by launching an attack over the summit of the Bosberg.
I wonder if George will try just once on this climb. The Bosberg is a nasty little climb, but these boys are riding tactically now. I think they're afraid of one another because I think they're almost equal in ability. They're all very tired men. The big danger for me, Paul, is the surprise Nardello.
Well, he's a great bike rider. He's the Italian national champion, and what a look up for the books that would be if he could win the Tour of Flanders with the Italian national jersey on his shoulders. And just as an anecdote, in fact, Andrea Tafi won Paris-Roubaix wearing that jersey. Tafi, I reckon, is setting himself up for another attack. We're on the Bosberg right now, 13 kilometers to go, and right now nobody really wants to make the move.
Well, I don't know. Tafi, for a second I thought Tafi was going to go up the inside and give it a shot, but well, what is he now? No, he's answering an attack here. And I think it's Museo who's gone. Museo's desperate effort now to shed the group, but Van Petegem is strong. Hincapie is strong. The other 2, I think, lack a little bit of urgent reaction, but they get on anyway. But I think this is the swan song for Johan. I'm not sure he can win Flanders now, but he's ridden a brilliant bike race, and he might well rue the day when he lost in that photo finish against Gianni Bugno some years back, because he may not be winning 4 after all. Peter Van Petegem looks the best, do you think?
He really is good. He's responded to all of the attacks right now. Museo has done everything he can to try and win this bike race, but I think right now maybe age is telling just a little bit. He doesn't have the ability to keep on the acceleration once he's started. Nothing has happened to that group, and Nardello, look at this. Nardello is waiting for the counterattack. He knows Museo. He's ridden with him for many, many years, and he just tried to nibble away and see if he could open an advantage over the top. We're now at the summit of the last climb of the day in the Ronde van Vlaanderen, the Bosberg, and 12 kilometers to go to the finish.
Yes, so we swing back to the 3 chasers, led by Sorensen, followed by Cassani and Misaglia. I don't think anybody in that front group now has the legs to destroy anybody in that front group. But, you know, they've got to watch out now for the crafty move, the one where they slip away rather than attack away, because we're on the long run-in now, the flatter roads. It's block headwind for most of the run into the finish. You can see the flags there, they're blowing strongly, and when your legs are tired after nearly 260 kilometers, then the headwind will have an effect. Taffy's the obvious choice to try to slip away.
Well, Taffy will try again, I'm absolutely certain. In fact, there's a rider in a white jersey trying to move. But you know, what could very well happen will be the setup for Daniele Nardello. Let's not forget, we've seen him put in some pretty serious sprints over his career. And if it comes down to the finish like this, he could be the man that really would surprise George Hincapie. I think the greatest thing that he's won in his career, really, though, is the Italian National Championships. He's tried so many times before, and last year he took that title just before the Tour de France.
Yes, but he's been a good World Cup rider. He's always been a podium finish. Tour of Lombardy, he's had a run-up spot there. He's finished 9th in the Amstel Gold, 6th in Paris, Brussels, 5th in the San Sebastian Classic. He's been knocking on the door of the big races, but he hasn't won one yet. And 5th, of course, in this event last year, so he won't want to finish 5th again, especially after the effort he's put in today. He wants a top 3 finish. He's never done that in the Tour of Flanders. 28 seconds, those boys are going away from the group again, as Museo rather craftily waves Taffy into the gap. And this is very typical Johan now. He's now reassessing his chances. Such a clever bike rider. I once remember, oh, and there it goes. Well, it had to come. Taffy's on his way. And the big launch of the attack, reaction from Van Petegem. And George Hincapie a little bit slow, but will line up behind Johan Museo okay. They're not allowing the move, are they? They're straight on.
You've got to be straight on at this stage of the game. 10 kilometers to go to the finish line. You really have to make sure as soon as the guy moves, especially a man like Andrea Taffy, you have to respond immediately without thinking about it, because if you give him 50 meters, it is very difficult after 250 kilometers in the saddle to nail it back.
Well, just to finish the story then on Museo, if we get 5 seconds, I once asked Johan at the start what his tactics were going to be to win the Tour of Flanders. In fact, he won it on this occasion. He simply laughed and said, "I'm not telling you, you might go and tell the riders." And so that's the sort of man he is. He keeps everything to himself and he plays his cards well.
Being very attentive right now. He's going to have to watch out, because Taffy will try and launch another attack. I was surprised to see there was no counter move there coming from Daniele Nardello as we go under the banner indicating 10 kilometers to go to the finish.
All flat except the rise up to the finish with the tricky right-hand bend. You must not lead out too early. These boys are also getting nervous that the 3 chasers are closing in, but in fact they're not. And we've had no further information on the main field behind them. But now Johan has decided it's time to just watch and wait and sit at the back here. He knows that people like Taffy will keep on giving it a go. Taffy just rolls through. Van Petegem, he's going to feel confident he can win this in the sprint and win his 2nd Tour of Flanders. But what's George Hincapie thinking? I'd like to know that. He looks strong and we just can't get any feeling of just where he sits in this breakaway right now.
Well, he knows how to sprint, but I tell you one thing, Phil, the sprint up the finishing straight here in Meerbeke is a very difficult sprint to work out, because if you start too soon, you really can find yourself fading rapidly, because it doesn't look like much. There's another move. Taffy digging away at the front there. He's going to keep going any chance he gets to try and slip off the front. But I've seen so many riders in the past make an absolute catastrophe of the sprinting up here to the line. And that's in fact what Sean Kelly did when he finished 2nd to Adrie van der Poel. He led out for so far and ended up getting 2nd on the line.
Yeah, well, they're all working through, and that's rather good. Nobody is missing a turn now.
Museo, he's at the front right now. These guys are trying to figure out what the run into the finish is going to be like. Museo must obviously be dreaming. There's another move. Taffy again, you see, but this is dangerous when Museo forces somebody else to make the move. You see how Museo then just hung back a slight fraction to force Van Petegem to be the man who would make the acceleration to pull back the Italian attack.
Well, we're looking at 5 riders who between them have won, and wait for this, Paul, 188 races in their careers in total. So none of them are shy. The majority of them have all been very close or have won World Cup races. This is an elite escape, so they're having to apply every tactic they've learned over their careers to beat one another. They all know the tricks, they all know the game, and they all know what it's like to win. And I suppose I should add, they all want to win today.
Everybody does. It is going to be so difficult. These guys, I think, are all pretty much tired, and no one has really got the ability to launch an attack off the front. The only way a man could go solo to the finish right now is because of tactical maneuvering, a matching of these riders one against each other. For the moment, it seems that there's no problem. Now Museau's trying it.
Here we go again. And this is the second one by Museo now. He couldn't make it on the hill, but you see the old zip is not quite there again. Heavily marked. These boys are paying attention today. And Van Petegem has made George Hincapie close it down and didn't take up the reaction.
Well, he actually forced Hincapie to go forward. Hincapie was hoping that Van Petegem was going to be the man to close the gap now. And I think Van Petegem, now watch this, Van Petegem's going for the move up the inside, going to try and surprise them.
Well, this is just over 8 kilometres from the finish, and that's a good move as they went over the traffic bumps there. He's jumped clear, he's caught the car, the motorcycle's completely out of sync there and causing a bit of trouble because he can't get through. Now, this is the huge problem here. They should not have been caught like that. I mean, we knew that he was going to attack sooner or later. Why didn't they? He's got in amongst the cyclists now, motorcyclists rather. The reaction is coming from Map 8, and I think that spoiled his attack.
Well, it slowed him down, definitely going through town there. That was a big surprise for the motorbikes. The man in the yellow there is trying to get everybody out of the way just so that the race is not falsified. Coming across the gap there, it looked as if Nardello was the first man to respond. He's around about 50 meters behind. But now, George, this is the time you've got to take responsibility. This is the moment you have to prove you're a champion.
He's got to go because Taffy won't go. Museo, I don't believe, has the legs. It's got to be George who puts it up, and really it's no good making the pace. He's got to jump away from these two and try to reach the two leaders. This is the most crucial moment of the race so far, and it's psychologically the moment. But here comes Nardello. If he contacts with Van Petegem, then the other three are out of it.
I would say it's all over. It doesn't look as if Van Petegem is absolutely flying along right now, and he may well be just backing off a little bit to allow Nardello to come up, because almost certainly Nardello is going to work hard with him.
I think we have seen the winning move. It's a question whether Nardello or Van Petegem will win now, and it looks as though Nardello is going to get on terms here, because Museo, I don't think there's much left, and George is on his own back there. The gap has opened very quickly. Van Petegem has seen Nardello coming across. He's eased slightly to allow him on, because two are better than one on this last headwind race to the finish, and Van Petegem is a very crafty rider too. There's the gap. Museo still willing to work. George certainly still willing to work. Taffy getting a free ride. If they do get back up, Taffy will win.
Well, he'll go for the attack almost certainly. If they are able to make the junction, then Taffy will have to launch the counter-attack. That must be the tactics of the Map A squad right now. But it was good to see that Museo had come to the front. You just saw the little twitch of his arm encouraging George Hincapie to come forward as well. They are slowly but surely edging their way forward again. You see those two men there on the front of that three-man group. George Hincapie and Johan Museo are working together as one. But watch out for the junction, because Taffy is now relaxing, he's breathing, he's waiting for his moment to pounce.
And it's going to come when they contact, because he's lying nicely a length or so off the wheel. Museo knows, he's looking where he is. He knows he's going to move. He is such a wonderful bike rider. He knows Taffy is going to jump, and he's going to watch him. Well, I really didn't think that was going to come back, and it did. And here, a little bit of a false one, that I think.
He wanted to surprise Museo, but at the same time he was just getting out of the saddle. Museo turned round and he knew that the move was going to come. He really is the master tactician. He's pulled himself back to that group. It looked very much like the winning move for a few moments there, and Museo actually maneuvered the situation to prevent Andrea Taffy from counter-attacking.
Well, this has been a great race today, the 86th edition of the Tour of Flanders. All of these riders deserved to cross the line in first place, but I'm afraid only one will. And Nardello has gone back into his place, and Van Petegem lives to think again as we go under what I think will be 5 kilometers to go. It is just 3 miles from the finish now. Remember that the finish is slightly uphill after a sharp right-hand turn. Very difficult judge for the sprinters.
It's a very difficult sprint to judge. It's so long from the corner down there. It's around about 500 meters from the bottom corner up to the finish line, and slowly but surely it drags up all of the time, eating a rider's strength away. Let's just have a look there at this moment when Peter Van Petegem got into the barrage of motorbikes in front of him. He was definitely slowed down there. Those bikes could not get out of the way because of all the other bikes in front of them, and in fact it was almost the moment when he could have got himself 150 meters lead.
Yes, we'll never know if it spoiled his victory run. I don't think it did myself, but they really should not be there, and there'll be questions asked tonight, I'm sure, when they get back in to the press room. But we're looking now at 5 bike riders. A quick recap. Remember, it was the US Post who led the charge onto the old Claremont It was there where the first selection was made, still pursuing a breakaway of 4 riders and primarily on his own, Erwin Thijs. And then the next selection came a little bit further down the road after the Koppenberg, and then these 5 got clear. The Lance Armstrong group almost came on but didn't. They failed by about 20 seconds to get on. They've fallen back, and Erwin Thijs was caught and dropped on the wall of Gerardsbergen. Now we've got these 5 left at 4 kilometers from the finish.
It's becoming very tactical right now, Phil. These guys at the moment are trying to wait. They're trying to listen to all of the movements that are coming from behind them. They're looking at the shadows on the road to see if somebody's going to try a last-minute surprise attack. Van Petegem, you see, very attentive, keeping his eyes on Andrea Tafi. They all know the tactics of Tafi, the Italian there in 4th position. He will attack and attack as many times as he can to try and surprise him. And there it is.
And here it goes. Tafi's gone again, just inside 4 kilometers. The reaction from Museo, but the old zip still not there. Hincapie's mark. Museo should go over the top, because if he doesn't, this is a huge effort by Tafi. He's won World Cup races like this before, and this is his swan song. This is everything he's got now with 4 kilometers to go. Van Petegem has sensed that none of the other riders have the legs. He's got to do it himself. But you see, Museo has marked Van Petegem. Now, the battle that's going on behind might be to Tafi's advantage.
Well, it might be, because you can see right now Museo was right onto the wheel of Peter Van Petegem there. Right now you have to nail this man down quickly. It's no good trying to work at a stage like this. You must use the sprint that you've got and accelerate over the top to make the junction. Hincapie now has to do it. He's going up alongside Johan Museo. The advantage of Andrea Tafi with 3 kilometers to go is not very much more than 50 meters, but it could be enough.
Well, our pictures have decided to give us a spot of bother, but don't worry, we'll stay with these pictures now as we'll sort it out towards the finish. But I really hope the camera, which is looking at these riders, hasn't gone down at this crucial moment. There's nothing we can do about it. But in your screen are the 4 chasing riders. The gap is still there to this man, Andrea Tafi, holding his own out in the lead. And this is an amazing break, and it's 100% effort now, Paul. If he gets caught, he's out of it.
There's nothing he can do now. He has to give every last possibility to try and stay off the front. He won't be holding anything back at all at the moment, Phil, because he knows if he does hold something back, there is a big chance that these guys will come back to him. He is still only holding a 50 to 75 meter advantage there, and this group is working together. Hincapie slotting into 2nd place there behind Johan Museo. Peter Van Petegem is there in 3rd. These guys have to work hard together right now, because if Tafi goes into the last kilometer with 100 meters advantage, it is all over.
So these are the riders now. 4 of them are riding behind Andrea Tafi, the man who is the great escape artist, the man who has won Paris-Roubaix, Paris Tours. He also, I saw him win like this, Paul, in England when he won the Rochester Classic, when it was a race that counted in the World Cup. And this would be a first time in the top 3 now for Andrea Tafi, and it could be the win.
Well, that's what he's looking for right now. It's a solo effort. It really isn't very much at all. He is just hovering there, but you can see the urgency now. Peter Van Petegem feels that he can win this Tour of Flanders, but this is not good. The way they're riding right now is playing into the hands of Andrea Tafi, but it actually looks as if the gap is starting to shorten.
I don't think he's won it yet, but that is a long way from the helicopter, a little bit further than it appears from the ground level cameras. But Van Petegem is looking a bit frustrated now, doesn't quite know what to do here. It's a question whether Tafi has got the strength to survive now, because his legs must be tired as he heads towards the kite to come, but inside 2 kilometers to go. I think in his final year, this would go down as his greatest win, including Paris-Roubaix.
Well, it would, but the race is not over now. There's another move coming. Peter Van Petegem accelerating. They won't get any help at all from the man in the tricolor jersey of the Italian champion, Daniele Nardello. He's a teammate of the man in front. They're now into the street of Meerbeke. They come around this corner and they will see the red kite in front of them. There it is. It is famous in this town for the finish line of the Tour of Flanders. They really don't have very much further to go. Tafi is still holding on, and if they play that tactical maneuver any much longer, he is going to stay clear to the finish.
Andre Taffy, almost 36 years of age, one of the oldest men in the race and one of the most popular, it has to be said, has won the Tour of Flanders. He's going to ride away from them now. He's still got the little right turn, which will take him the last 500 metres, but the tactics are on now in the race for second place, and Andre Taffy has caught them napping. This will go down as one of his finest ever victories, victory number 30 in a career which began in 1989. Nardello will be happy, Museo frustrated. What will Van Petegem think? And George Hincapie wants to finish this off now with a fine second place, and that's the way it's going to be, because this race is over and they've got to watch behind as well, because the chase is on. And now Andre Taffy is beginning the celebrations. This is a magnificent crowd, one of the biggest I've ever seen for the Tour of Flanders. A beautiful spring day in Belgium as Italy continue to dominate Belgium's biggest bike race. Andre Taffy salutes the crowd. Win number 30 it is, his first win of the season. Boy, this man has got a great palmarès. He can add this to the Tour of Lombardy, Paris-Brussels, the Rochester Classic, Paris-Roubaix, and he's now got to add to it Paris Tours, and finally the Tour of Flanders. A fantastic victory there for Andre Taffy. Now comes the sprint for second place as they head up now towards the line. Nardello, the danger sprinter. Hincapie is forced out of it, I think, as they come clear, and Johan Museo, I think, maybe just pipped on the line there, but he may not. I think Museo got it. So he really is going to kick himself now, Paul.
Well, he certainly is. He really was the strongest man, and these are the remnants of that leading group of 8 riders coming up to the line as well. Museo had the kick, and I think that was why he was a little bit worried, Phil. He thought those old legs of his didn't have the acceleration anymore, but at the end of the day, they certainly did. A brilliant ride by him, but what a move by Andre Taffy. He goes again and again and again just to wear everybody out. This is Rolf Sorensen coming up to the line right now with Cassani and Gabriel Misaglia.
And Sorensen looking for a 6th place finish here, and he was in 5th place, 4th place last year. Now can he just hang on? Yes, he can. Another brilliant ride from the big Danish rider. So Sorensen comes over the line ahead of Cassani and Misaglia, who they're both really exhausted. Oh, this has been a wonderful day for Andre Taffy. He speaks English, he speaks French, as well as, of course, his native tongue. And he is such a popular rider. Well, the welcome he got in the Tour de Langkawi and the Tour Down Under, where he was in effect riding farewell races in far-off states and countries, and now here, still away from his home, he salutes the biggest crowd we've seen so far. And that, you know, it just goes to show you never ever give up trying to win a bike race. He tried on the climbs, he tried on the flat, and whenever they caught him, he simply tried again. In the end, it paid off for him. And Johan Museo will be absolutely fuming, because he's now slotted in to the 2nd place in the Tour of Flanders for a 3rd time, which marries up with his 3 first place wins as well. Well, Andre Taffy, we first came to know him when he turned pro back in 1989, when he rode in Miami, Florida, winning a stage at the old Tour of Americas. And I looked at my co-commentator then on American television and said, I've never heard of him. And well, we've all heard of him now in his final year as a pro. And I was around the breakfast table in the Tour Down Under in Australia when he suggested it would be his final year. He's the battle for the minor places now, and there's Big Cipollini. He's taking valuable World Cup points there, and Rodriguez will be just on the edge of scoring points, only just. But certainly Cipollini, with that sprint, by my reckoning, of course, will keep his lead in the World Cup competition. And this is the sprint for 2nd place here. Johan Museo now having 3 second places in the Tour of Flanders, getting the better of Peter Van Petegem. George Hincapie crossing the line. An excellent 4th place for the rider. Remember that Mappe had a couple of riders up in this breakaway. The American living up to all of the confidence placed in him by the team, and in particular Lance Armstrong.
Ludo, pretty tough race this year, and it was a bit strange because in that back group it was very tactical, with a lot of the Lampre riders a lot of the Mappe riders just sitting on the moves.
Yeah, it was a strange race today, but it was a very hard wind, and it was always in the front, the wind. And I had my wheel in the back was broken, and I had to change the wheel and had to do a long trace. Yeah.
But it seems as if the addition of the Koppenberg didn't really change very much the last 60, 70 kilometers of the race. It actually seemed as if it was not as tough as it was those years before.
Yeah, it was tougher, but with the wind in the front, it are the cyclists who made the race.
But you're in good form, and okay, a little bit of bad luck today. What about next week in Paris-Roubaix?
Yeah, I feel good on the cobblestones, and also today I feel my legs good for next week.
Congratulations anyway.
George, first of all, can you tell me what the problem was with your bike?
My chain, I bridged up to Museo's group on the bottom of the Koppenberg, and as soon as we took the right corner, I went to put in a small chain ring and it got caught, and I bent the link. So the next 30 kilometers up the Koppenberg, even when I got in that original breakaway, my chain was broken. It was skipping every third pedal stroke, and it was impossible for Dirk to ride. So I had no choice. I just had to stay up there and wait. So that was kind of difficult to ride like that. And then I changed my bike on the Eichenberg. So I got a new bike there.
You must have had to stay pretty calm waiting at that crucial part of the race for the team car to come up, because it seemed like an awful long time to wait.
Yeah, I lost my cool a couple times because Dirk was just not coming, but I totally understand that he was behind probably 20 groups at that point. So I just needed to wait, and I realized that the only thing I could do was keep my cool. So I tried to calm down and relax and just wait for Dirk to show up.
It was an ideal situation at the end, 5 riders, but it seems as if nobody wanted to chase in an organized fashion.
No, when Taffy first got away, Museo said, we'll work together. So I started pulling, but then Van Pittigem wasn't pulling, and then Museo stopped pulling. And it was just we weren't working together. It would have been better if all three of us, gave a real hard effort with 1K to go. But I don't think at that point there wasn't much cooperation, normal in a World Cup.
It's a bit strange that everybody was expecting Taffy to move and nobody responded immediately, and that's the only way to get onto the back of an attack.
Yeah, definitely, especially when he attacked in the bit of a tailwind section. Taffy was super strong today. It was a big surprise that he was able to ride and win the race like that.
A bit of a blow to you psychologically because you felt that you could win this Tour of Flanders. Can you get your mind ready for next week in Paris-Roubaix?
It's definitely a blow, but not to my psyche, because I'm confident. I'm happy with the way I feel. I'm confident for the next couple of races. Thank you.
That's right, George.
Thanks.
You're still the first American.
Well, Paul Sherwen back alongside me now after the interview there with George Hincapie. But I'll tell you what, Paul, that was a great race.
It was a brilliant race, and there were great names up at the front there. Van Pittigem, Museo and Andrea Taffy. I'd really wanted Museo to win because this is probably his last year as a professional. To get the record would have been great. He proved to be a great battler. Yeah. But I think the man who won at the end of the day, Andrea Taffy, proves that consistency and attacking all of the time at the end of the day pays.
A lot of people are saying here how he outwitted the Belgians, and he certainly did that by just never giving up and always trying for the victory. I hope you enjoyed this coverage of the 86 Tour de Flanders. We've certainly enjoyed bringing it to you. This is a special one for the files. Until the next time, for Paul, I'm Phil Liggett saying goodbye. Well, I hope you enjoyed yet another cycling video from World Cycling Productions as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. Now, what many of you probably don't know is that I'm also the international editor of Cycle Sport, a fully international magazine which brings you all of the up-to-date news in the cycling world. It brings you profiles and reports of the top bike races and also stories of the men that make the news. And it keeps you up to date too with the technical innovations in our sport. I think we produced the magazine using some of the world's best writers. I know we certainly have one of the world's best photographers in Graham Watson. If you love cycling, you should see this book, and here's how you go about getting a subscription. Subscribe to Cycle Sport and we'll send you a free WCP video. Just call the number listed or visit our website cyclesportmag.com for a complete listing of the free videos available and for other special offers too. Don't miss this chance. I'm sure you'll love the magazine and I look forward to visiting you each month through my column. Colnago is one of the perennial favourites of riders on the pro peloton. Why? Because Colnago bikes win races. Over history, Colnago bikes have been ridden to victory in the Giro d'Italia, in the Tour of Flanders, and a record-breaking 5 times in Paris-Roubaix. In fact, they've won the last 5 out of 6 editions of this great event. Now that's one amazing bike. World Cycling Productions is the exclusive catalogue distributor of Colnago frames in America. To see more about these magnificent frames, simply call the numbers on the screen for a World Cycling Productions catalogue or visit our website at www.worldcycling.com. WCP is one of the largest Colnago dealers in North America with selection and pricing to ensure that you can own one of these magnificent bikes.